Chapter 797. Li Qingshan sat on a branch, chatting with the banyan tree king, at ease. That's more than just fellow. The gentleman of heavenly blubber murmured. He's basically like his own son. The banyan tree king was most renowned for his peaceful, neutral attitude. He was so extreme that he refused to do anything himself, even when a worm had grown up in his tree. Now, he had actually agreed to help Li Qingshan maintain the formations. He seemed very helpless, but it had undoubtedly deviated from his principles that he had always done. It's no wonder he's not afraid of the king of Southern Yu. With the banyan tree king's protection, he can move about freely in the Mist Province like it's flat ground. Yu Wufeng sighed inside. In the Mist Province, two great organizations each occupied half of it. One was the human cultivation community with the king of Southern Yu as their leader. The other was obviously the demons, but it was not just demons. There were many other folk too, all led by the banyan tree king. In reality, the latter's organization was even greater. Although he had never directly used this organization to fight for any authority, just like how peaches and plums did not need to be spoken, things were naturally different. He was different from the other 10 demon kings. He practiced the way of nature, benefiting countless lives. He established a system of order in the Mist Province without using force. However, little did he know that the reason why the banyan tree king had agreed to this excessive request was not because he admired Li Qingshan as a person, but also because Li Qingshan knew when to advance and when to retreat. He knew when to stop and when to stop. Even when he was hunted down by the Dragon King of the Sea and was on the brink of death, Li Qingshan did not ask for help from the banyan tree king, nor did he flee to his territory. If he was afraid the Dragon King would catch up to him if he was too far away, then the Golden Cicada Spirit King was right beneath the Clear River Prefecture in the magma. He was clearly an arm's length away, but he did not even think about asking for a favor. He asked for protection. It was exactly this character of taking responsibility for his actions that made the banyan tree king willing to break his principles for him. This kind of respect could be said to have been earned by Li Qingshan's life. If the king of Southern Yu truly launched a large-scale attack and reached a point where he could no longer turn back, Li Qingshan definitely would not rely on the banyan tree king's protection. Under Yi Liusu's command, the night roamers all took up residence. After settling down, the men and women, old and young, were all overjoyed by this new environment. In the future, I will definitely go to your towering sky city to take a look, Li Qingshan said to the banyan tree king. Towering City was located in the solitary tree commandery. It was the largest city in the Mist Province, as well as where the banyan tree king's main body resided. Sure, you're welcome anytime. At that time, I'll introduce a few young friends to you. Actually, it's more suitable to be a monster, said the banyan tree king. I'll have to go through 3 heavenly tribulations after settling things with the Dragon King of the Sea. That way, it'll be easier for me to meet them, just in case your young friends look down on me and think I've come to make trouble for you, Li Qingshan said. The banyan tree king's young friends were all demon kings that had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations. They were the core force of the Mist Province's demons. With the passing of the era of the 72 demon kings, many more demons had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations in the past few millennia, becoming demon kings and maintaining the balance with the humans. However, probably only the banyan tree king possessed such cohesiveness among the 10 demon kings' royal court. Li Qingshan had only learnt from a conversation with the banyan tree king that there was also a group of demon kings in the Dragon King of the Sea's royal court, but they only obeyed orders. They obeyed the Dragon King's commander in name and cultivated in seclusion. Unless war between the humans and demons reignited, they basically would not emerge. Compared to humans, demons had always been reclusive. They would not found their own sects or establish clans. And in this age where humanity flourished, the Treaty of Kings was still in effect, so there was even less reason for demon kings to wander about. That was because demons had long lifespans, and their concept of time was different from humans too. After reaching this realm of cultivation, entering secluded cultivation for a century at a time was common. It had only been 2 decades since Li Qingshan left the Crouching Ox village. Most of the time, he was active in the human world. Meeting a demon king was much more difficult than meeting a human great cultivator. Li Qingshan also felt fortunate. Fortunately, the Dragon King was reclusive, or revenge would have been 10 times more difficult. At this moment, the Azura field flashed with blood-red light and began to operate automatically. Li Qingshan sent his soul sense in a hurry and discovered that after the Banyan Tree King had left, the empty space left behind in the Azura field had already been enveloped by a faint blood-red mist. The blood-red swirl in the air suddenly began to revolve. There seemed to be a huge funnel in the depths of the swirl, and the aura that belonged to the Azura realm surged in. Li Qingshan handed the Azura field to Little, and for safekeeping before leaping into the Azura field. Fierce winds blew, and killing intent surged. Li Qingshan stood right below the center of the swirl. A deafening roar rang out by his ears, and he discovered that it was his own voice. The tiger demon that had remained silent for a very long time roared at the sky. Ever since his battle against MOU, he had encountered many opponents and killed many after the Phoenix's Nerva. However, not a single one of them could rouse the tiger demon. Li Qingshan had always been focused on the Phoenix's scripture of Nerva, although he wanted the tiger demon to break through to the 5th layer. There had never been any progress. Only at this moment did the vicious tiger in his heart awaken from its slumber, sensing the summoning from another world. That was a land of endless slaughter. Battle was its only theme. Li Qingshan's mind roused. He was like a sleepy person breathing in the cold air of winter. He thought, sure enough, the Azura field is of great assistance to the tiger demon's transformation. At this moment, something seemed to flash past the depths of the whirlpool, like a flash of light. When Li Qingshan narrowed his eyes and looked over, he saw nothing at all. He suddenly felt a sense of danger, and he turned around abruptly. It was more like the tiger demon's battle instincts than the spirit turtle's premonition. Its pitch-black eyes shone brightly, and a circular blade flew out from the space before him. It spun rapidly, but also silently, cutting towards his neck. The angle it chose was so ingenious and vicious that even Ghost Shadow could not match it. It also contained countless variations. It actually made Li Qingshan feel like he could not dodge it even though he had been through countless battles. The strike had already pushed the art of assassination to a breathtaking level. Nice, Li Qingshan praised. He exhaled and blew the circular blade away with a whistle. He threw a punch towards the back of the blade. Tremble! His strength had completely recovered now, and after the Phoenix's Nerva, he was even stronger than before. He completely unleashed the power of the tremors of the Ox Demon. No matter how fast his opponent was, they would be caught up in it and forced to reveal themselves. With a great rumble, the ground within a radius of 5 kilometers cracked, and the air shattered. However, to Li Qingshan's surprise, the punch still missed. It did not hit the invisible assassin. Instead, the circular blade flew back. Chapter 798. The circular blade spun towards Li Qingshan. Suddenly, it shone with blood-red light, and a ripple-like blade of blood condensed on the edge of the circular blade. It grew to the size of a round table and whistled shrilly as it spun rapidly, as if it wanted to cut through everything. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed and his eyes narrowed. Spirit turtle's profound shell. A thin, faint blue barrier of light formed from countless hexagons blocked the circular blade's path. However, the collision he imagined did not happen. With a flash, the circular blade passed through the spirit turtle's profound shell and slashed towards his face. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. The spirit turtle's profound shell was unscathed, but the circular blade had actually directly pierced through space. Not only did it render his strongest defense useless, but it had also happened extremely suddenly, catching him off guard. This head-on attack was even more vicious than the silent sneak attack just now. Just when he was about to gain the upper hand, the circular blade suddenly descended and slowed down. Gravity of the Earth. In a battle between experts, there was only a single line. Whether it was fast or slow, it was a line. It was a matter of life and death. Li Qingshan extended his hand and grabbed. Wherever the black shockwave passed by, the blood-red light shattered. He directly grabbed the rapidly spinning circular blade and stopped it immediately. A deep, bloody gash appeared on Li Qingshan's palm, but it recovered in the blink of an eye. Esteemed guest, why don't you come out and greet the master? You're the master of this Azura field. A figure suddenly appeared 10 steps away. Before this, even Li Qingshan had failed to sense any aura. She wore a vicious mask as she stared deeply at Li Qingshan with her blood-red eyes. A female Azura. Li Qingshan immediately became interested, but it was not because he was excited to see a woman. Instead, all the Azura that came to the Azura field from the Azura realm were male. This seemed to be due to the imbalance in the ratio of males and females in the Azura realm. It made sense when he thought about it. Bloodthirst and warlike was more of a male instinct. It was said that the males of Azura were extremely ugly, while the females were extremely beautiful. He had no idea what they looked like behind the mask. So he smiled and said, "Not bad. You seem to have some strength. Why don't we make a deal and submit to me? Why don't we make a deal? Hand over this Azura field to me, and I'll spare your life." The female Azura sneered. Spare my life. You've even lost your weapon. What else can you do? Li Qingshan waved the ring blade in his hand. It was unknown what material this circular blade was made of. He squeezed her hand. It didn't change shape. What can you do to me? The female Shura waved her hand, and the circular blade returned to her hand. Then it disappeared into the void along with her. Her figure flickered from time to time, searching for an opportunity. Just now, they had exchanged blows twice. Her opponent's strength was beyond her expectations, but she wasn't afraid. She was proficient in the art of hiding in the void and could hide and travel through the void. This technique completely surpassed the night roamer's night roaming techniques. If space was compared to a piece of paper, then everything in the world was a painting on the paper. She could dive deeper into the paper. No matter how sharp her opponent's senses were, they would struggle to discover her. Even if she could not win, she would be undefeatable. This technique required the most exquisite control over the laws of space. According to her judgment, although this world wasn't a small world, it couldn't be considered a great world either. Instead, it was a medium world. The third or fourth heavenly tribulation was the limit. Any higher, and they would have to ascend. Across the entire world, there were probably not a lot of people who could restrain her art of hiding in the void. The man before her was only at the second heavenly tribulation, so it was even more impossible for him to do that. However, she felt slightly uneasy inside. His first punch just now seemed to shake up the void, but she believed it was just her imagination. Sure enough, women like men, who are a little more forceful. Li Qingshan rubbed his chin and sniggered. Demon chi surged from his body, and it suddenly expanded. 3 meters, 15 meters, 30 meters, 100 meters, 100 meters. He had ox horns and ox hooves, tiger claws, and a tiger tail, and his back was as broad as a spirit turtle's, while his wings were unfurled like a phoenix's. Demon! The female Azura shivered inside. She had never expected him to actually be a demon, despite seeming like a human. However, he also gave off a rather unusual feeling, which made her think of those people of the heavenly ways for some reason. This was the first time Li Qingshan had transformed into a demon after undergoing the Phoenix's Nerva. He was in no hurry to deal with the female night roamer. Instead, he summoned the spirit turtle's profound shell and formed a huge mirror, inspecting himself. He also sensed the changes in his body. In the past, when he practiced the ox demon transformation and the tiger demon transformation, he was a demon through and through. His entire body radiated with ruthlessness. At this moment, his tranquil eyes and broad back exuded a steady aura. A pair of huge phoenix wings hung down from his back like clouds in the sky. Every single feather seemed to be formed from condensed flames. Logically speaking, it would be very incongruous for such magnificent wings to appear on his dark, vicious demon body, but it was the exact opposite. Not only did it not feel incongruous at all, but it was instead like he was born like this, like he was supposed to look like this. Although his appearance greatly differed from humans, there was a wondrous smear of divinity within his demonic nature. Even if a mortal were present, they might still feel fear, but they would struggle to associate him with the word monster. That was a body of the demonic and divine that had transcended the aesthetic standards of humans. If you still don't surrender, I'm going to take action. I'm just afraid I'll accidentally kill you. Li Qingshan's metallic voice rumbled through the clouds like thunder, echoing through the entire Azura field. The female Azura hid in space. This was a world of absolute silence. Whiteness stretched out endlessly, giving off a feeling of boundless emptiness. The slightest carelessness would make them lose themselves in their forever. Although this world seemed empty, every step forward required a great deal of effort. She cast her spiritual sense into the Azura field, not only to find an opportunity to fight, but also because she was afraid of losing her sense of direction. The scene was different from what she saw in the real world. Indescribable colors surged before her eyes, close yet far away. It was as if paint had seeped into the paper. From the outside, it looked like a normal picture, but from the inside, it was a blurry block of colors that blended together. What was needed was not rational discrimination, but keen intuition to immediately make a judgment. But even so, she could still feel an indescribably enormous pressure. The colors that belonged to him were so bright that she could not ignore them. However, she still treated his threat with contempt. I'll just hide here and not come out. Let's see what you can do to me. As if responding to her thoughts, Li Qingshan smiled faintly and punched out in the direction of the space she was in. Boom! An explosion suddenly broke the silence of the space. This white world was shaking. Before she could recover, she had already been swallowed by the power of the tremors. Chapter 799. How does he know I'm in this region of space? How can he attack me? The female Azura was shocked. She felt every single bone in her body tremble before shattering. Her flesh went without saying. She was like a rag that had been ravaged viciously. With a thump, she fell out of space. She was already a bloody mess. She no longer resembled a human. Li Qingshan bent down and picked her up like he was pinching a bug. He placed her in his palm and touched her with his fingertips. Don't play dead. In terms of battle prowess, the female Azura was no weaker than Li Qingshan. Across the 9 provinces, she could be regarded as one of the best among the second heavenly tribulation. However, Li Qingshan's strength had surpassed the second heavenly tribulation a long time ago. He had no shortcomings in any aspect. All he needed to do was lock onto the female Azura's position through the spirit turtle's senses. Then, all he had to do was throw a punch at her. It sounded simple, but even third heavenly tribulation demon kings and cultivators might not possess both the ability to predict and the power to shake space. As a result, he only needed 3 moves. The first move was to learn of the enemy's existence, the second move was to understand the enemy's methods, and the third move was to defeat her. Fortunately, Azura's life force truly was extraordinary. The bloody mess wriggled. Before it could recover completely, it suddenly flashed and used the technique of hiding in space again. Li Qingshan snickered. He released a chaotic shockwave from his palm. She spat out a mouthful of blood and laid on his palm. He did not understand the laws of space, but he had already sensed her when she recalled the circular blade just now. How could he let her escape again? He couldn't hide in the void. However, it was very simple to prevent her from doing so. The female Azura was unwilling to give up. She tried 2 more times, but it only worsened her injuries. In the end, she gave up. The legends really are true. The women of Azura are all beauties. Li Qingshan said. The shock wave attacked indiscriminately. Not only was the female Azura's visor gone, but her beautiful face was also revealed. A beautiful face was revealed, and even the clothes on her body were torn to shreds. Her body was exquisite and could be said to be a stunning beauty. However, even Li Qingshan was surprised. He didn't have many lustful thoughts, not only because of the huge difference in their stature, but also because he felt that his mind had become broader after transforming into a demon. Mere lust was not enough to linger around him. The ambition to dominate the world. Instead, it was burning fiercely. His only wish was to pluck the stars and the moon, moving mountains and filling seas. The ambition of a real man. Not only was it between the mattresses, even this Azura field that was hundreds of miles around felt small and restricted. They could not be allowed to roam freely. The cultivation method was called the 9 transformations of the demons and gods, and as his cultivation increased, due to the difference in his realm, his way of thinking and vision had also unknowingly changed. Li Qingshan rummaged through his sumaru ring and took out a dress, tossing it to the female Azura. She sure was straightforward, accepting the dress without any hesitation. She stroked it and admired it carefully before putting it on without much fuss. This was a set of spoils of war from the silkworm lady's 100 treasures pouch. She wore it and looked even more charming. However, that cold and bloody aura would not change. With a boom, Li Qingshan sat down and looked at the female Azura in his hand. What is your name? Yin Qing. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Li Qingshan saw that she was still fearless despite being in the enemy's hands. He couldn't help but feel that it was strange. Anyway, this is not the first time I have been killed. I will naturally revive in the Azura realm, Yin Qing said indifferently. In reality, she had already died over a dozen times. As long as one was accepted into the Azura realm and became an Azura, death was normal. And as long as the will to fight did not disappear, even if they were killed, they would revive. This was called the undying Azura body. If you die in my hands, you may not be able to revive. Li Qingshan grinned, his sharp teeth like giant stalactites. Then we can just end it, Yin Qing said. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He studied her face. This definitely was not an act of facing death calmly. Instead, it was an almost numb indifference. Forcing her to submit to him would probably be rather difficult. He probed, "Be my subordinate." "Okay," Yin Qing said. Li Qingshan was stunned. "You agreed just like that. What else do you want?" Your fellow clansmen should at least let me release my domineering aura before they bow. Then release it, In Qing said unconcernedly. However, she had a strange feeling. This was indeed not the Azura realm. Okay, Li Qingshan's expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened and his nose wrinkled. He was like an enraged tiger, extremely ferocious. His aura surged, and his scarlet hair flew like fire. In Qing was dumbfounded. She looked up at him. Azura King? She was not surprised to encounter experts from other worlds, but this kind of aura made her feel as if she had returned to the battlefield of the Azura realm. After In Qing entered the Azura field, the blood-colored vortex had already slowly stopped spinning. However, stimulated by Li Qingshan's aura, it started spinning again. Li Qingshan withdrew his aura and said with a smile, "How about it? Unfortunately, you're too weak and can't stimulate my fighting spirit. Otherwise, I could be even more impressive." "This isn't a place you should stay," In Qing said. "Oh, then where should I stay?" "There." In Qing pointed upward, at the depths of the blood-colored vortex. "One day, I will go." Li Qingshan glanced over, and then he lowered his head and said, "But before that, I have to understand what sort of place it is. Do you know?" He'd always been trying to understand the appearance of other worlds. Even if he was unable to clearly see above the 9 heavens, he could at least get slightly closer. The guests from the Azura realm were naturally a good choice. However, it was slightly regretful that those ordinary Azuras and Azura generals were utterly unable to give Li Qingshan a satisfactory answer because their strengths were too low and they were immersed in the endless battles. "I know a little, but before that, I have a request." In Qing's attitude softened slightly because Li Qingshan revealed the aura of an Azura king. To a certain extent, this was almost instinctive. She'd followed many Azura kings to battle all over the world, and when she was drawn into the Azura field, a battle had just ended. She'd relied on her ability to hide in space to survive until the end. On the battlefield that was illuminated by the blood-red moon and covered in corpses, a blood-colored vortex had suddenly appeared. She could have escaped, but she hesitated for a moment and allowed the vortex to suck her into it in the end. "Speak," said Li Qingshan. "I want to take a look at the outside world." It was an unexpectedly simple request. Li Qingshan said, "You wouldn't be thinking of escaping, right? Don't you know? Once an Azura, forever an Azura. Unless you're able to leap out of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Otherwise, you'll forever be unable to escape. You can only leave temporarily," said In Qing. In other words, she had to rely on the Azura field to maintain her existence in this world. Of course, it wasn't that she didn't have any other way, and that was to ceaselessly slaughter. However, she couldn't torture and kill those who were weaker than her by too much. Squatting at the edge of an ant's nest and crushing ants wasn't called slaughter, and to her, mortals were no different than ants. However, if she targeted cultivators, then it would undoubtedly be challenging the order of the cultivation world, and in the end, she would be unable to escape the fate of being slaughtered by the experts of this world. As a result, there had been many instances of Azura invading the 9 provinces and committing massacres, but none of them were as terrifying as the invasion of the Hungry Ghost realm. Li Qingshan saw that she seemed to have thought of something, and a shadow appeared on her face as she pondered. Endless battles probably can't be considered a happy life, especially for a woman. "All right, then come out and take a look with me." The moment In Qing walked out of the Azura field, her heart almost stopped beating. Misty rain drifted through the valley, and a few birds chased each other as they flew into the hazy sky. Everything seemed so peaceful. She took a deep breath, and a smile appeared on her face. Then she saw little N at the side, and praised inwardly what a beautiful person. Although Azura women were known for their beauty, and she was one of the best among them, In the Azura realm, the only beauty was the beauty of slaughter. The desire to battle and slaughter suppressed everything else. When a male Azura saw her, their first thought would definitely be to kill her. Moreover, because every female Azura was very beautiful, the concept of beauty became even more blurry. However, when she saw Little, and this concept suddenly became clear, and she instinctively made a comparison. She felt that although she was slightly inferior, she was not bad either. Only then did she calm down. This long-lost thought caused her emotions to surge. Li Qingshan only understood after a very long time why male Azuras were ugly, while female Azuras were all beautiful. In each rebirth, the old body would return to the Azura realm, and the new body would walk out from the sea of blood. The changes in their bodies were largely due to their thoughts. Men wanted to become more vicious to intimidate their opponents. As for women, no matter how many times they had been reborn, they were unable to abandon their love for beauty. Li Qingshan introduced, "This is Yin Qing, who has just come from the Azura realm. She can hide in the void, and her strength is very good. She's a powerful assassin, and I plan to learn about the Azura realm from her. This is Little, and in the future, apart from me, you only need to listen to her orders. Don't worry, her strength is definitely above yours. If there's a chance, we'll have to compete to know." How could she still be in the mood to listen to Li Qingshan's long-winded words? She wandered through the wilderness to her heart's content, breathing in the moist air that did not smell of blood. Her face was brimming with a moving smile. Every leaf and every insect was so novel and so familiar, reminding her of those blurry memories from a long, long time ago. Li Qingshan and Little looked at each other and shrugged. "Country bumpkin, you've never seen the world." Little stared at Li Qingshan. "So many women, so many. You can't blame me." She ran over from the Azura realm herself. "And I have no interest in this kind of woman who reeks of blood and doesn't even know how to be shy." Chapter 800. Li Qingshan smiled helplessly and hugged her affectionately. Then he flew to the peak of the mountain beside Yin Qing and saw that she was staring at the sky in a daze. The leaden clouds pressed down heavily, sprinkling down waves of rain and mist. She opened her arms and let the rain fall on her face, as happy as a child. "It's a pity that it's a cloudy day, and we can't see the sun. If it were a sunny day, the scenery would be better." The sun. Yin Qing's eyes lit up as if she'd received a hint. She leaped up into the air and charged through the clouds. The dazzling sunlight illuminated everything, and the sea of clouds surged for thousands of li. Her temperament suddenly became bright and beautiful, and the gloom of the past 100 years was completely swept away. After roaming around to his heart's content, he returned to Li Qingshan's side and said, "From now on, I will serve you. I still don't know your name." "Li Qingshan. Because the mountain below is called Savage Mountain, people call him Savage King." "All right, then, Lord King of Savages, what do you want me to do for you?" Yin Qing cupped her hands and bowed. She naturally carried the bearing of a soldier, appearing valiant and formidable. "I want you to cook for me." Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. Yin Qing was surprised. Let alone the years she had spent in the Azura realm, she had never done this even before she had become an Azura. The food of the Azura realm was famous for being disgusting. There were even rumors that the Azura realm had conquered the Heavenly Way because it was jealous that the Heavenly Way had delicious food to eat. She said, awkwardly, I can give it a try. Other than assassination, what else can you do?" Li Qingshan shook his head, helplessly. She really had no sense of humor at all, but he was very satisfied with her respectful attitude. "You're right. Only then did Qing realize that he was joking. After a while, there will probably be a mission for you. However, this isn't the Azura realm, so there aren't as many battles here. I'll take care of most of the battles myself. You can treat this as a vacation and rest in a different environment, Li Qingshan said gently. Among his many subordinates, Qing's strength could be said to be the strongest. Her void movement technique made it almost impossible for her to find an opponent. Even Yu Wufeng, who was close to the third heavenly tribulation, would be assassinated by her if he was not careful. Moreover, she was a warrior who did not fear death. Although she lost to him, she did not submit to him because she was threatened with death. To Li Qingshan, it was better than the 10 fellows on the blood oath scroll. That was more worthy of respect. Now that I've heard what you said, milord, it seems like losing to you is a good thing. Qing smiled. Good or bad? You can slowly experience it yourself. In short, tell me about the Azura realm first. The two of them sat on the sea of clouds and started talking. The sun slowly moved until the stars filled the sky and the moon rose high in the sky. That's about all I know. After all, my cultivation is limited, and I have heard many things from others. As for whether it's like that or not, I can't guarantee it. Qing glanced at the moon in the sky reluctantly. I have to return to the Azura field. Li Qingshan nodded slightly and opened the Azura field, letting Qing enter. He continued to sit alone on the sea of clouds, frowning in thought as he muttered to himself, 3,000 worlds, 6 paths of reincarnation, 4 Dhyanas, 9 heavens, stones from other mountains could be used to attack Jade. This was indeed true. Qing's words that even she could not verify greatly affected Li Qingshan. Some of his questions had been answered, but there were 10 times more questions. This was the appearance of the world that she had seen and heard from the Azura realm. That feeling was like humans discovering that they were drifting in the boundless universe for the first time. They could not help but sigh at their insignificance. An overly narrow space would make people feel restricted, but an incomparably vast space would also disturb people's minds. So that's how it is. Li Qingshan sighed, and the corner of his lips gradually curled into a smile. He just spread his limbs and lay on the sea of clouds, laughing aloud. Little, and the world is so big. The 9 heavens are so far away. No, it's not that far, right? Before he knew it, Little and had already crouched beside him, cradling his face as he gazed at him and nodded with a smile. Li Qingshan stared at the silver plate-like moon, now that the foundation was set, and the king of Southern Yu had made his preparations. It was about time for him to carry out the next step. But before that, he should go to the Great Cloud Dream Marsh and see how Ruexian was doing. The vast Great Cloud Dream Marsh was perpetually shrouded in mist. White water birds danced about in flocks, flying from one small, verdant island to another verdant island. In the depths of the marsh, the jade melting cauldron was covered in mud. It trembled from time to time, flashing with red and blue light. Ruexian sat inside, quietly with her beautiful blue fishtail curled up. She practiced the heavenly tome of cloud furnace and spent the most peaceful 3 years of her life. In order to refine the Great Cloud Dream Marsh, Li Qingshan killed a demon commander there, which had actually raised some attention a long time ago. However, it did not become an actual threat in the end, which was obviously all thanks to the Banyan Tree King. Otherwise, if a guy of unknown origins refined such a great marsh, it would undoubtedly destroy the original order of the demons of the Mist Province. And the temptation of a water god seal like that was so great that even demon kings would be interested. Of course, when the Banyan Tree King helped Li Qingshan, he was also protecting the demons of the Mist Province. Otherwise, if they ran into him recklessly, even his little friends might not necessarily be able to deal with them. Even if they gained the upper hand right now and stole the water god seal, who knew how they would die in the future. This bastard Li Qingshan treated the Dragon King of the Sea as his target. He wholeheartedly wanted to go to the Ink Sea to slay dragons. As a result, the two sides were at peace. The King of Southern Yu did not care too much either. Refining water and mountains was very common in the Mist Province. It was not as important as the Green Province. Moreover, this was a region under the rule of demons in the first place. Since the Banyan Tree King had not responded, he only thought it was internal strife among the demons of the Mist Province. Afterwards, a certain powerful demon gathered enough water god seals and built a water dwelling. This was a very common matter. The Mist Province had never been at peace. Even human cultivators constantly fought against one another, let alone demons that were completely different and purely based on strength. They did not have an ironclad rule, like the Green Province that forbade demons from killing one another. Sometimes it would even reach the level of the third heavenly tribulation. Many times, the two kings would even be needed to mediate between the two. Within chaos, order naturally exists. This was the deepest understanding that Li Qingshan had after coming to the Mist Province. It seemed like a lawless land of chaos, completely ignoring the laws of Great Xia or the morals of mortals, but there was a set of invisible laws operating here. Thump, thump, thump. Ru Xian suddenly opened her eyes. Someone was knocking the pill cauldron, and a familiar voice rang out by her ear. Chapter 801. Ru Xian smiled. No, little girl, if you don't open the door, I'm going to break in. With a soft sound, a series of white bubbles rose up, and the sludge slid down from the pill furnace. The pill furnace opened, and Ru Xian walked out. Their eyes met, and they both smiled. They hadn't seen each other for nearly 3 years, but in this smile, it was as if they had just parted yesterday. Your cultivation speed is too slow. I gave you the water god's seal, but you still haven't undergone the second heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan sized her up. She had already retracted her fishtail and turned into human form. Her skin was even more lustrous, like the highest quality white jade. Even her lips were like natural red jade, and her flowing eyes were like rare black jade. She was like a jade beauty that had been enlightened by an immortal coming to life and had an otherworldly aura. How can it be that easy to undergo the second heavenly tribulation? I can't compare myself to some beasts. Oh, I'm not talking about you. Ru Xian said with a smile. You don't need to emphasize it. I know you're talking about me. It's useless to be envious, jealous, and hateful. This is the difference between a genius and a mortal. Oh, right? Don't forget, you're not a human either. Mutant, Ru Xian said, and tossed a jade bottle to Li Qingshan. Drink it, you beast genius. This is... Li Qingshan opened the jade bottle, and a faint red liquid rippled within. Ru Xian had given him a bottle of medicine like this before. It could balance the power of water and fire, and it had a miraculous effect when used when advancing to Demon Commander. And this bottle of medicine seemed to be even purer and richer than the previous one. Stomach ache medicine. My stomach hurts after drinking it. How can there be such a medicine? Just how was this thing refined? Didn't you say you didn't have the flower of water and fire? Li Qingshan asked. To him, this small bottle of medicine was more precious than any miraculous medicine, but the more it was so, the more he wanted to understand its origins. You're a man, no, a beast. Why are you so wishy-washy? If you keep talking nonsense, there won't be any more in the future. How are you doing in Nanjiang? Ru Xian changed the topic. With my methods, I can do whatever I want in a mere southern border. I am now known as the King of Savages. I've established a dwelling in Savage Mountain, and I have countless experts under me. I was just about to invite you over to enjoy yourself. Li Qingshan toyed around with the jade bottle in his hand. King of Savages. Ru Xian was stunned. She clearly knew what kind of place Savage Mountain was. And what did the Savage King mean? However, he smiled and said, "Don't you think this nickname is very stupid? Just by hearing it, I can tell that it sounds like it's just there to make up the numbers, and it doesn't sound good. It doesn't matter what it's called, but before we go to the southern border, you should at least tell me, why do you want to go to the South Sea?" Although she had deliberately changed the topic, Li Qingshan would not let her go so easily. "I'm a mermaid from the South Sea. I've returned because I miss my hometown. Isn't this reason very reasonable?" Ru Xian shrugged. "You said it's a reason, so you better tell me the truth. Don't force me to torture you. You're not my man. Why do you care so much about me? If you want, I can be too. As expected, you don't want it at all." Ru Xian thought about it seriously. "Hey, what is it that you can't say? Tell me." Li Qingshan truly ground his teeth in hatred. He was tempted to knock her mouth open. He pressed down on her shoulders with both hands, about to throw down a few harsh words and force her to speak. However, when he looked into her eyes, the words turned into a long sigh. He let go of her and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I give up, my lady." "Sigh." Ru Xian agreed, with a smile. "Let's go. We'll go to Nanjiang. When you have something to say, you can tell me. I have to say, you've reminded me that there are still some things that can't be done forcefully." Li Qingshan had a helpless expression. "It's not that I can't." The corner of Ru Xian's lips curled into a smile. "It's that I'm unwilling." "Humph, as long as you understand." Li Qingshan left behind his mirror clone in Great Marsh of Cloud Dream to wield the water god seal before taking off on a cloud, traveling to the south with Ru Xian. Sitting on the cloud, Li Qingshan told Ru Xian about his experiences in the south. Ru Xian could not help but mock him a little, but she was unable to hide her concern. In her eyes, Li Qingshan's current situation was not very optimistic. The King of Southern Yu definitely did not hold any goodwill towards him. Once the Mist Province declared war with the Green Province, he would definitely be the first one to sacrifice him. The King of Southern Yu was weaker than the Dragon King of the Sea, but if Li Qingshan wanted to contend with him, he would have to unleash the power of the North Moon. Once his identity was exposed, the Dragon King of the Sea would immediately kill his way over. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga probably would not be able to tolerate him either, so how was he supposed to run around freely? "What are you worried for me?" Li Qingshan saw how she furrowed her brows and could not help but smile. To his surprise, Ru Xian did not respond viciously. Instead, she said seriously, "It's best if you don't cause too much trouble. Just cultivate in seclusion on Savage Mountain for a few years and find an opportunity to return to the Green Province." "Then what about you? We're cultivators. Shouldn't we each walk our own paths?" Ru Xian said. Every single cultivator's paths were different. Perhaps they would overlap from time to time, but they would still walk in different directions at the end of the day. If they got in each other's way because of their feelings, then it would be better for them to forget about each other than helping each other in difficult times. "Without you, who's going to refine pills for me? We've known each other for so long, so when have I ever been afraid of trouble? Once we get to the south, come with me to Fire Melt Mountain." "Ha, that's an old enemy of you merfolk of the South Sea, but I don't think you have any racial sentiments," Li Qingshan said. He was in no hurry to ingest the bottle of medicine that balanced fire and water. He had just undergone a lengthy period of secluded cultivation, so he was in a good mood right now. He would stick to the plan and go to Fire Melt Mountain first to obtain the divine Wudong tree before ingesting it. The effects should be better. Why are you going to fire Melt Mountain? Ru Xion's expression was rather strange. I'm going to negotiate with the fire-devouring king and see if he can lend me the divine Wudong tree for a few days. The divine Wudong tree. Ru Xion's expression changed slightly. That's the sacred tree of the fire-devourers, and it's where the royal court is located. Even the fire-devourers can't approach it casually, so why would he lend it to you? You sure know a lot about it. Help me come up with some ideas. How can I make the fire-devouring king change his mind? Li Qingshan said, fire-devourers have violent tempers. They're courageous and belligerent, and they're extremely vengeful. They're definitely not easy to get along with. I'd advise you to give up. I wouldn't be worried if you provoked the myriad poison ancestor. At his age, he'll definitely be weighed down with misgivings no matter what he does. However, the fire-devouring king will really make it impossible for you to establish a foothold in the south. Ru Xian said, aren't you just trying to goad me into contending with the fire-devouring king? Li Qingshan smiled. Ever since he had spoken to the Golden Cicada Spirit King and the Banyan Tree King, he had become determined to obtain the divine Wudong tree. He wanted to see just how difficult the fire devourers were to deal with. I have absolutely no such intentions. Ru Xian suddenly raised her voice and looked at Li Qingshan, saying sternly. Chapter 802. Ru Xian also realized she had lost her composure. She shook her head gently. Just pretend I didn't say anything. I'm afraid I can't help you with this. Her long eyelashes cast a deep shadow, preventing Li Qingshan from seeing her eyes. Li Qingshan sank into his thoughts. As the cloud rapidly traveled south, Ru Xian's words gradually faded away. In the end, she fell completely silent, staring towards the south for a very long time. When the sun set in the west and the stars filled the sky, Li Qingshan said, "We've arrived at Savage Mountain." Ru Xian said inside, "The south, I've returned." Fire Melt Mountain stretched for several hundred kilometers. It was a huge mountain range. The rocks were scarlet red like fire, and there was not a single blade of grass growing on it. There was only a vermilion color. Bam-like plants grew and grew like clumps of fire. Li Qingshan and Little and gazed down from the cloud. All they saw was that the mountains were like fire. Every single scarlet red peak seemed to be burning, like a sea of fire that spanned several hundred kilometers. At the center of the sea of fire was a huge volcano that stood several thousand meters tall. The rocks had already crystallized, and firelight seeped out from the belly of the volcano. At first glance, it seemed like a ball of flowing scarlet fire. The entire mountain is actually made of fire spiritual stone. If I can cultivate here, my phoenix transformation will definitely advance rapidly. It's no wonder the phoenix used this place as a cultivation dwelling in the past. Li Qingshan had once cultivated in a group of volcanoes to the north of the Mist Province. He found it quite nice, but compared to Fire Melt Mountain, it was nothing worth mentioning. Several hundred pillars of black smoke rose into the air. This was the smoke produced by active volcanoes that erupted all year round. The smoke condensed without dispersing, resonating with one another from afar. It seemed to possess some intelligence, entangling with one another in the air like snakes. Great rivers flowed down from the crater of the volcanoes or gushed out from the cracks. They flowed around in channels that were clearly man-made, forming a complicated inscription that gathered power. This is a colossal formation. Little and was afraid Li Qingshan did not understand what he was trying to say, so he added, "Even if the king of Southern Yu wants to launch an attack, he'll have to pay a corresponding price." In other words, even if they went as far as to expose themselves, it was impossible for them to take down Fire Melt Mountain. Despite their strength, it was comparable to 3 heavenly tribulations. However, the purpose of the fire melt mountain formation's existence had always been to fend off opponents at this level. Li Qingshan nodded. Across the entire Mist Province, only the fire devourers did not fear the king of Southern Yu. He ignored the Banyan Tree King. He must have something to rely on. Fire devourers were renowned for their violent and warlike nature among other folk. They could be said to be a warlike race, and they had occupied such a treasured land for thousands of years. The strength it contained was truly immeasurable. Apart from the formation and the fire-devouring king, no one was bold enough to say whether Fire Melt Mountain had any other king-level masters. The lifespans of other folk paled in comparison to demons, but they were much longer than humans, and they were born with the spiritual nature of the world. In terms of bloodline, only descendants of clans and certain exotic beasts could rival them. They could be described as possessing the advantages of two races at the same time. They could be described as prodigies of heaven. This point was extremely evident with Yi Liusu and her sisters. Among the group of friends Li Qingshan knew in the Clear River Prefecture, basically all of them could be described as geniuses, but they were still stuck at foundation establishment. Not a single one of them had undergone the second heavenly tribulation. Just how many years had it taken for his father-in-law, Han Anjuan, to undergo the second heavenly tribulation? Although the three of them had Li Qingshan's assistance and some guidance from the Banyan Tree King, their cultivation speed was still startlingly fast. And apart from them, there were a few other night roamers who were close to the second heavenly tribulation. They were all matriarchs and princesses of past night roamer clans. The bloodline of regular night roamers was equivalent to descendants of clans. Their talent was great, even though they were not as great as Chu Tian's Five Elements Constitution. Yu Zijian's Pure Yang Constitution was not too far off, and they were the best of the best among the night roamers. However, they had been suppressed by Helicoverpa rosa for many years, unable to unleash their full potential. They had basically built up their strength now. If Li Qingshan was not stingy with origin spirit pills, he would be able to obtain a group of powerful night roamer assassins in just a few years. He also understood why the Great Xia Empire allowed the sale of other folk as slaves, and why they did everything they could to suppress them. Legend had it that the 9 provinces had once been ruled by other folk in the ancient times. Other folk were known as Ga-folk. They established divine kingdoms and enslaved humans and demons. Afterwards, they only overthrew them by combining the strength of the two races while the other folk were in conflict. Looks like the fire devourers really are a tough bone to chew. Li Qingshan waved his hand. Profound light illuminates all. The spirit turtle's profound shell condensed into a sphere in the surroundings before suddenly dispersing. Every single piece illuminated a scene, illuminating Fire Melt Mountain down to the slightest detail. Fire devourers could be seen playing and fighting in the magma and flames, as well as redstone structures in a crude style that sat on the 2 banks of the Fire Seam River. Li Qingshan waved his hand again, and the spirit turtle's profound shell stacked together. He gazed at the huge, red, crystal-like volcano on the main peak like a pair of binoculars. In the crater of the volcano was a majestic city built on the rock face. Long corridors wound around it, leading straight to the very bottom of the volcano. The weakest fire devourers who could reside and move about here had undergone the first heavenly tribulation. There were so many of them that it would make many large sects ashamed. A palace hall that seemed to be carved out of red crystals was located at the bottom. Its foundation was also a thick layer of red crystals that covered the entire crater. Flames were surging under the crystals, as though they were ice formed from fire. That was the purest fire spirit stone of the highest quality. Firelight flowed through every single piece of fire spiritual rock. It was beautiful, That was where the royal court of the fire devourers resided. Found it. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. In the very center of the crater was a huge wudong tree. Its roots were deeply rooted in the fire spiritual rock, extending into the magma. Its pale white trunk and fiery red leaves gave off a holy glow. That was the legendary divine wudong tree, the habitat of the phoenix. Just by glancing at it from afar, Li Qingshan felt a sense of familiarity and closeness, like a wanderer who had left home for many years had returned. The wudong tree seemed to be calling out to him. No, not him, but the phoenix. The phoenix would never return. Who's so bold as to spy on my fire-melt mountain? A furious voice exploded in Li Qingshan's ears like a volcano eruption, filled with violent fury. A streak of fire rushed out of the crater like a meteor, flying in the opposite direction, flying towards Li Qingshan. The White Hawk commander, Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed and stated his name. He asked, "Fellow, are you the fire-devouring king, Zhu Yan?" With a boom, the meteor suddenly came to a halt. A bare-chested man in his prime strode out of the flames. His face was handsome and rugged, like he had been carved from red rock. His fiery hair burned fiercely as he held a spear in his hand. His fiery red eyes stared at Li Qingshan, producing two sparks. Chapter 803. Li Qingshan said, "That's right." Zhu Yan studied Li Qingshan up and down before suddenly bursting into laughter. "Why are you laughing, fellow?" Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. "I'm laughing at a brat like you. You're bold enough to refer to me as fellow. You really don't know your place. Those ignorant people call you the king of savages, but do you really think you're a king?" Zhu Yan did not hide his contempt towards Li Qingshan at all. The flames on him roared, and waves of heat surged towards Li Qingshan, ruffling Li Qingshan's clothes. The hierarchy of the cultivation world was strict, more distinct than any social class. The vast heavenly Tao was the sole ruler. It used heavenly tribulation after heavenly tribulation to divide all living beings into different ranks. The difference of one heavenly tribulation was like the difference between heaven and earth. The higher one's cultivation, the greater this difference would be. It was impossible for those above to treat those below as equals. Being able to treat each other politely was already a sign of great self-cultivation, and this was the politeness a king would show to his subjects, the politeness a senior would show to a junior. The Banyan Tree King only referred to Li Qingshan as fellow because he felt it was a fortuitous encounter, coupled with his relatively gentle nature. This matter left the king of Southern Yu very surprised. The fire-devouring king, Zhu Yan, clearly did not possess such self-cultivation, nor did he believe Li Qingshan had the right to stand on equal footing with him. Li Qingshan laughed aloud too. "Kid, what are you laughing about?" Zhu Yan saw how Li Qingshan could still laugh under the pressure of his aura, so he lost some of his contempt. There was a reason why this kid could cause such a great disturbance in the South in such a short amount of time. If you don't like being called fellow, then forget it. It's just polite anyway. Not just anyone has the right to be my friend. Li Qingshan said. "You." Zhu Yan became furious. He studied Li Qingshan again and pointed at him with the spear of fire. "You sure are bold. Just what are you trying to do by spying on Firemelt Mountain? If you don't explain yourself, eat my spear." Li Qingshan had basically experienced the temper of fire devourers. Not only were they easily angered, but they were fearless too. His various backgrounds. Even the king of Southern you would have to reconsider. The fire-devouring king had threatened to kill him the moment he opened his mouth. Just how arrogant was that? He knew that this time it would be difficult to be kind, not to mention that he was not willing to bow down. Even if he was willing, it would only make Zhu Yan even more arrogant. He took it as a last resort, and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I heard that there is a divine wutong tree in your mountain that is very mystical. I would like to borrow it." Zhu Yan was taken aback. "Is there something wrong with your head?" Li Qingshan said. "Is there something wrong with your ears?" Zhu Yan's eyes widened. He was on the verge of erupting in anger, but he began to laugh again. He rested the spear on his shoulder and actually did not lose his temper. He said in a joking manner, "It's not impossible for you to borrow the divine wudong tree, but there's a condition." Li Qingshan was rather surprised too. He asked, "What condition?" "Go to the South Sea and bring me the head of the Merfolk King, and I'll lend you the divine wudong tree." Zhu Yan smiled. Li Qingshan frowned. This bastard was clearly messing with him. He said sternly, "If I had the strength, I might as well just take your head." Zhu Yan's face sharpened. "Since you don't have the strength, then piss off. I'll spare your life for the sake of you making me laugh. You're not allowed to call yourself the king of savages in the future, or if I find out, I'll burn down your savage mountain." He seemed crude, but he actually still had some misgivings about Li Qingshan's identity. However, his misgivings were not the Chan monastery of Devanaga or the unraging monk, but the great Xia Empire. In a place as chaotic as the South, basically no one would care about the identity of a White Hawk commander. Even if he died, the Hawkwolf Guard would not avenge him. However, there was an exception. The great Xia Empire was extremely wary of other folk, in particular the most belligerent of the 7 other folk, the fire-devouring folk. If a White Hawk commander died on Firemelt Mountain, perhaps the divine hawk might cast its gaze here, leading to unpredictable consequences. Although the great Xia Empire was beginning to decline, Zhu Yan was unwilling to take this risk just to kill an idiot with a screw loose. Fury ignited in Li Qingshan's chest, turning into raging battle intent. His dark eyes stared straight at Zhu Yan, gradually dyed red by the flames. Zhu Yan let out a gentle sound of surprise and squinted his eyes. He actually felt threatened. "You really overestimate yourself. If you really want to die, I'll give you what you want." Little and tugged at Li Qingshan's sleeve and shook her head gently. Li Qingshan withdrew his aura, and his expression had already calmed down. He clasped his hands. "I've witnessed the might of the fire-devouring kings today, so this trip has been worth it. Since you refused to lend it to me, sir, I'll be taking my leave first." Without caring about how Zhu Yan responded, he left with a flick of his sleeve. In that split second, he had considered various possibilities, such as luring Zhu Yan into the Azura field and killing him with little N. However, while the Azura field had improved, it was basically impossible for it to trap an expert at this level, and it would be very difficult for them to kill him in a single strike. In reality, the chances of being killed at the 3rd heavenly tribulation were extremely slim, unless there was an overwhelming disparity in strength or an extremely powerful spatial confinement. And across the entire 9 provinces, there were very few existences that could form an overwhelming disparity in strength against Zhu Yan, as well as a space that could imprison him. At the very least, Li Qingshan did not possess either right now. Coupled with the fact that Firemelt Mountain was right below, where other 3rd heavenly tribulation fire devourers might exist, the chances of killing Zhu Yan were basically 0. Li Qingshan and Little and would have to risk exposing their identities and being killed. As a result, Li Qingshan left without any hesitation. The corner of his lips curled into a smile, silently uttering something that many villains would say, "I'll be back very soon." After glancing at the divine wudong tree through the profound light illuminates all, he was already determined to obtain it. He had a firm intuition that the ancient tree where the phoenix resided, or even the entire Firemelt Mountain, would be crucial for him to practice the phoenix's scripture of Nerva. Zhu Yan's mockery threats, and humiliation were instead a good thing. It had completely awakened the tiger demon in his heart, rousing his spirits. If the enemy was not despicable, killing them would not be satisfying. Since the fire devourers are already known for their belligerence, I'll give them a war. Zhu Yan gazed at Li Qingshan's back as he traveled off into the distance. He suddenly felt slightly uneasy. This kid already possessed such a cultivation at such a young age, so he could be regarded as a rare prodigy among humans. If he was given time, he might actually be able to undergo the third heavenly tribulation. And the woman beside him was very extraordinary too. If they really did undergo the tribulation successfully one day, wouldn't that mean the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became after reaching the third heavenly tribulation? Even if he did not practice divination, he would still possess a profound sense of fate, which allowed cultivators to make the correct choice. Zhu Yan's eyes erupted with flames, and he suddenly tightened his grip on the spear in his hand. Chapter 804. Hold on. A sense of danger suddenly surged through Li Qingshan's heart. A call rang out from behind him, and there was a flash of fire before him. Zhu Yan blocked his path with his spear. Flames surged around him as his aura surged. What else do you want, sir? Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow and glanced at Little and had always been expressionless in front of others, but Li Qingshan could tell that she clearly understood what was going on. He thought, this girl, I've changed my mind. I'm willing to lend the divine Wudong tree to you for cultivation. Zhu Yan pointed his spear at Fire Melt Mountain, basically carving the words ill intentions into his face. Oh, don't you need me to exchange for it with the head of the Merfolk King? I've already prepared to go to the South Sea. Li Qingshan laid out his hands with a smile. Haha, with just you? I can understand that you can't afford it. So I'll show some mercy and lend it to you. Kid, why don't you hurry up and thank me on your knees? Zhu Yan's eyes were filled with mockery, like a cat toying with a mouse, and a mouse that was extremely arrogant and had no idea what was going on. However, Li Qingshan's calm and fearless attitude made him raise his guard slightly. How can I lend the treasures of the fire devourers to an outsider? I've misspoken. I'll never mention the word borrow again. Li Qingshan glanced back at Fire Melt Mountain. The divine Wutong tree stood in the center of Fire Melt Mountain. Once the formations were activated, even demon kings would struggle to escape death. Even if Zhu Yan had been willing to lend it to him sincerely in the beginning, how could he use it without worry? Not to mention that he was clearly filled with hostility right now. Since he could not borrow it, then he would take it by force. Wondrous treasures of the world belonged to the strong. All he could do was fight. What? You said you wanted to lend it to me earlier, but you're not lending it to me now? Are you toying with me? Today, you'll have to lend it to me even if you don't want to. Seeing that Li Qingshan wasn't fooled at all, Zhu Yan's face turned grim. Sparks flew out of his mouth and danced around Li Qingshan. Didn't your mother teach you not to spit when talking to others? Li Qingshan waved his hand impatiently. He laughed and said, Besides, if I, your old man, want to leave, I'll leave. How can you stop me? Li Qingshan took out a violet talisman with a flip of his hand. Before he came to Fire Melt Mountain, he originally planned on seeing the divine Wudong tree in person. It would be great if it really was true. Then he would negotiate a deal with the fire-devouring king. He borrowed the right to use the divine Wudong tree, conquering all over the southern border. He had also accumulated a large amount of spoils of war, and this purple talisman was one of his spoils of war in the southern border. He never expected the fire-devouring king to cut him off as soon as he opened his mouth before going all out with his mockery. There was no room for negotiation at all, and now they were prepared to make a move. However, it was not like he was unprepared or in other words, under little n's special reminder. Of course, while violet talismans were powerful and rare, they could not pose any threat to Zhu Yan. However, this violet talisman was not for battle. A great shifting talisman. You want to leave? Zhu Yan recognized the talisman with a single glance. With a snap of his fingers, the specks of sparks suddenly erupted, expanding by thousands of times. The power they unleashed was enough to split open mountains and split open the ground. Li Qingshan turned around and pulled little N into his arms. With a great rumble, the surging flames completely swallowed them. From the ground, they seemed like flowers that had suddenly bloomed in the sky. The spear in Zhu Yan's hand turned into a scarlet streak of light, stabbing towards Li Qingshan with lightning speed. He did not give Li Qingshan the opportunity to activate the violet talisman at all. The lofty demon suppression tower fell down, enveloping Li Qingshan and little N. The tip of the spear collided with the tower, emitting a sharp clang. Zhu Yan was slightly surprised. Although he had not used his full strength in that attack, he did not expect the demon suppression tower to be so tough. In that instant, thousands of sparks burst forth from the tip of the spear, as if thousands of explosions had occurred. The demon suppression tower only lasted for an instant before shattering. However, by the time the flames dissipated, Li Qingshan and little N had already disappeared. Humph! And here I was thinking that you had something to rely on to speak so arrogantly before me. It's just a great shifting talisman. I'll find you and skin you alive. Zhu Yan snorted coldly, and 2 streams of flame spewed out of his nostrils. Then he looked around and closed his eyes to sense. The great shifting talisman could not be compared to the purple escape talisman, which could allow one to travel 5,000 kilometers. It could only move 500 kilometers at most. Coupled with the fact that he was moving 2 people at the same time, they would not be more than 250 kilometers away. They would not be able to escape his pursuit at this distance. However, after a while, he opened his eyes and frowned. How can they hide their auras so thoroughly? It's as if they don't exist. Without any hesitation, he chose a direction based on his intuition and turned into a meteor as he gave chase. However, he flew back a while later. Clearly, he had not succeeded. Zhu Yan wanted to attack Savage Mountain, but he gave up on the idea after some thought. Humans and demons could do something like that, but there were too many taboos for other folk, so they could not act recklessly. They've taken a blow from me, so they're probably heavily injured as well. Their cultivations are greatly affected. The 3rd heavenly tribulation is like a natural chasm that separates countless geniuses. Even if this kid succeeds one day, it'll be 100 years at the very least. Why would I be afraid of him? On the other hand, the merfolk of the South Sea have been rather restless recently. They're preparing for the next expedition. In the misty forest, Li Qingshan and Shaoan walked side by side next to a small river. They were surrounded by giant trees that looked like skyscrapers. The leaves were like clouds, and the roots were like dragons and snakes. The mist was as thick as milk. As they moved forward, it slowly dissipated, giving off an ethereal aura. However, if a mortal was here, they would be reduced to a pile of bones. In an instant, the roars of demons rose and fell, and the shadows lingered in the thick mist. Li Qingshan could hide his aura to the point where not even a drop of water could be seen, like a spirit turtle in the depths of the sea. Little N's path of white bone and great beauty was renowned for the path of life, death, and space. It was just a set of white bones, so how could he sense it? If regular 2nd heavenly tribulation cultivators were to receive the fire-devouring king's spark explosion, they would be heavily injured. However, Li Qingshan practiced the Phoenix's scripture of Nerva, so his tolerance for fire was very great. He was basically unscathed. However, he dared not underestimate the fire-devouring king because of this. The strike was only a probe at most. It was not even a formal attack. If it really were a battle to the death, it would be impossible for the phoenix to ignore the fire-devouring king's flames if it had not reached the fourth layer. Not to mention, the skill in battle and his tough body demonstrated by the spear made him hold a very high opinion of Zhu Yan. No wonder he's so arrogant. If I were to fight him alone, I probably wouldn't be his opponent. Fortunately, you reminded me to prepare a great shifting talisman, or it really would be a little troublesome. I need to find a way to collect a few more in the future. It's a pity that I don't have an innate ability like MOU, or I can go wherever I want in the world. Li Qingshan said to Little, and with some pity. He had even tried to learn the hiding through space from the Azura Inqing, but even in the Azura realm, there were not a lot of people who knew this move. Not only did it require talent for controlling space, but it also took up a tremendous amount of time and effort, so he could only give up on it. Not now, but who knows, maybe in the future. Little and smiled. Her hair that reached the ground was like seaweed floating in the seawater, dragging behind her. Hopefully, the fire devourers really do live up to their reputation for being bad-tempered. I definitely can't just let the matter go with him this time. I wonder if that bastard will go to Savage Mountain? Other folk have always been xenophobic. They hate humans in particular, and you're a White Hawk commander too. The Great Xia Empire has issued orders to hunt down the fire devourers several times in the past, and it was the Hawkwolf Guard who dug out their hearts for merit. However, I do hope he goes to Savage Mountain, said Little, and, oh, why? As long as we sacrifice 10 cave masters, there should be people who can help us deal with the problems of Firemelt Mountain, said Little, and a king of other folk had attacked a blessed land and massacred human cultivators, and they were all second heavenly tribulation cultivators too. Was he planning on rebuilding his divine kingdom and washing away his old grievances? How could the Great Xia Empire tolerate him? Li Qingshan was mildly taken aback before smiling. Everything is going according to your plan. He never thought the Blood Oath Scroll would actually have a use like this. Actually, there's no need for 10 people. We only need to send the Marquis of Serene Sea to his death. Fair enough, but he probably won't go. He doesn't take us seriously either. As soon as Little and turned around, Li Qingshan pinched her delicate nose and smiled. You knew the fire-devouring king would be like this a long time ago, didn't you? You even told me to negotiate with him, which made me lose so much fun. I even wasted a talisman. Nothing is absolute. Perhaps he really will offer us something we can accept, and it won't be the Merfolk King's head. Moreover, we have to personally confirm the divine Wudong tree before we can decide whether it's worth the effort or not. Little and pouted and said with a nasal voice, It's worth it. It's very worth it. We're basically determined to get it. Tell me, what other brilliant plans do you have? Li Qingshan rubbed her head. Haven't you already thought of it? Little and said, That's right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If we want to take down Firemelt Mountain, we need to borrow the strength of the merfolk of the South Sea. That little head of yours sure is thinking too much. Li Qingshan nodded. If they had all undergone the third heavenly tribulation, flattening Firemelt Mountain would not be difficult. However, they did not have that strength right now, so they needed to borrow their strength. If they did not have the Blood Oath Scroll and went to the South Sea and told the Merfolk King, We're willing to lend you a hand and destroy Firemelt Mountain, it'll probably be boring again. However, if the two of them were coupled with the 10 cave masters who had sworn a blood oath and 12-second heavenly tribulation cultivators, it would be enough to become an important counterweight to the balance between the two races. They might even be able to drag the South Sea sword pavilion down with them. However, even though they had made so many preparations, how to borrow their strength was still a problem. They would definitely be wary of him, and he could end up as a sacrifice with the slightest carelessness. The key is how to move the Merfolk King. Merfolk don't have such a bad temper, but they're exactly the same when it comes to xenophobia. Merfolk hide in the South Sea, and the Hawkwolf Guard has far less information than the Fire Devourers, so it's really difficult to make a decision. Humph, if that stonefish woman still doesn't help out, I'll eat her, Little and said. Stonefish woman? Li Qingshan was taken aback. He smiled. You're talking about Ruexian. Don't worry, she'll definitely help me. At this moment, Li Qingshan's expression changed. He exchanged glances with Little, and someone is attacking Savage Mountain. Floating Heavens said, No bullet window. Chapter 805. Above the azure sky, among the white clouds, the myriad poison ancestor sat on a jade throne and stroked his long beard gently as he stared at Savage Mountain below with his green eyes. Banners fluttered in the surroundings as disciples of all ages and genders gathered around. They were all dressed in the same way, either in green robes or dresses. Even the weakest among them was at the first heavenly tribulation or above. There were almost 100 of them, demonstrating the heritage of a large sect. Master Li Qingshan and Li Qingshan aren't on Savage Mountain right now. There's no one presiding over the protective formation, so it's a perfect opportunity to attack the mountain. However, Qian Liangmu flew back from Savage Mountain on a green cloud and reported politely, but he hesitated again. However, what? The myriad poison ancestor stopped stroking his beard. However, I can tell that Li Qingshan has no intention of founding a sect in the south. He'll return to the Green Province sooner or later, so why must we attack Savage Mountain? Qian Liangmu asked. He, the mighty poisonous young master, actually has such a gentle side. Probably no one in the south will believe us if we tell them. A beautiful woman smiled. A large, colorful spider sat on her shoulder. Its 8 compound eyes stared at Qian Liangmu, shining with an extremely human-like viciousness. Don't tell me he's been frightened out of his wits after seeing Li Qingshan? A middle-aged man, as thin as a bamboo, continued. He stood on the head of a poisonous centipede that was several meters long. The two of them stood on the left and right of the 10,000 poison cult leaders' green jade throne, showing their different identities. They were Qian Liangmu's junior sister and senior brother, people who were qualified to compete with Qian Liangmu for the position of the 10,000 poison cult leader. Demonic sects had never been one to care about relationships, so their relationship was obviously like fire and water. They would never let an opportunity to strike at each other slip by. Qian Liangmu sneered and completely ignored them. He bowed. Please reconsider, Master. Qian Liangmu did not agree with attacking Savage Mountain. He was not a kind person. He would never let an opportunity to kill and rob slip by. However, when the Banyan Tree King referred to him as fellow, he became rather hesitant. Coupled with their meeting a few days ago, he just felt like Li Qingshan was not as simple as he seemed. Do you think I can't deal with him? The myriad poison ancestor said in displeasure. This disciple wouldn't dare. Qian Liangmu said, How can I allow someone to sleep beside my bed? Since he is unwilling to lower himself and become my 10,000 poison cult's protector, I will make sure that he has no place to stand in the southern border. You can leave now. Green light flashed through the myriad poison ancestor's eyes. He exuded an unparalleled and powerful aura, and all the disciples lowered their heads. The southern border had always been dominated by him, and he would never allow other forces to develop. If one day Li Qingshan really left the Qingzhou, he would not be able to do anything. If he became an honored guest of the king of Southern Yu's estate, he and the woman named Little, and would definitely become a great problem with their talent. Wouldn't they become a laughingstock of the world? As for some of Qian Liangmu's concerns, it wasn't that he hadn't considered it. However, with the difference in their cultivation levels, it wasn't worth it at all. The king of Southern Yu did not take action. He had only accepted the Banyan Tree King's advice out of consideration for the situation of the two prefectures. Could it be that he was really afraid of Li Qingshan? This brat is arrogant and rude, refusing the goodwill of the 10,000 poison cult. God damn it! And he's only at the second heavenly tribulation, yet he's bold enough to call himself the king of savages, or whatever. Master wants to teach a false king like him a lesson today, so that he understands the difference between him and a true king, said the gorgeous woman with the spider. Junior brother, if you're afraid, feel free to return to the Mist Capital. I'm willing to lend my meager strength to assist Master in destroying Savage Mountain. Capture Li Qingshan alive. The centipede man said, and shot a glance at the surroundings. Apart from a few elders who were proud of their statuses, the regular disciples all called out with him. Destroy Savage Mountain. Capture Li Qingshan alive. For a moment, the banners swayed, and the battle cries shook the sky. The myriad poison ancestor slammed the armrest of his throne and stood up. With a wave of his right hand, the chilly winds and green flames swirled and gathered, condensing into a dark green sphere. Lightning crisscrossed and flowed, and the light dyed everyone's faces green. The lightning pearl of myriad poison was a secret technique of the myriad poison cult. It possessed the toughness of lightning and the gentleness of poison, making it extremely destructive. In that moment, even the sun seemed to dim. Everyone's gazes were drawn to the lightning pearl of myriad poison. Green light flowed through the myriad poison ancestor's eyes, and he extended one hand to both hands. The lightning pearl of myriad poison spun and grew larger and larger, shining brighter and brighter. In the blink of an eye, it reached the size of a water tank and was pushed down violently, immediately striking Savage Mountain. Rumbling filled the heavens and the earth, causing the earth to tremble slightly. Lightning shot out and dyed the sky green. Then it turned into a poisonous cloud, enveloping an area of several thousand kilometers. It surged through Savage Mountain and produced an ear-piercing sound of corrosion. The disciples of the myriad poison cult all cheered. Mighty ancestor, you've scared Li Qingshan so much that he pissed his pants, too afraid to leave the sect. I've practiced the lightning pearl of myriad poison for all these years, but I never thought this move would actually possess such power. Now that I've seen the ancestor take action today, I finally understand why our myriad poison cult can dominate the South. Li Qingshan is like an ant trying to shake a tree. How laughable! Savage Mountain has already fallen, so I'll serve as the vanguard for the ancestor right now and capture Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor stood with his hands behind his back rather proudly. The corner of his lips curled into a complacent smile, but his smile suddenly stiffened. He barked coldly, "All of you shut up!" Everyone fell silent out of fear. They had no idea why the myriad poison ancestor had flown into a rage. Only when they looked over did they see that beneath the poisonous cloud, Savage Mountain remained shrouded in mist and clouds. The protective formation was unscathed. Their flattery was no different from mockery. Qian Liangmu thought, sure enough, it's not that simple. Senior brother, didn't you say the formation on Savage Mountain is unmanned? The Spider Woman questioned. Li Qingshan and the others really aren't on the mountain. I never thought they'd be bold enough to pass the control of the formation to someone else. On Savage Mountain, The banyan tree king sighed inside. This kid sure knows how to make trouble for me. He used his roots to extract the dense spiritual chi of Savage Mountain before scattering it into the air through the branches and leaves, activating the various formations. He had already become the eye of the formation, using the geographical advantage of Savage Mountain and his extremely abundant knowledge and experience to unleash the extraordinary power of the formations. All of you, shut up. None of you need to do anything. Just watch properly. The myriad poison ancestor bellowed out furiously and left the jade throne, flying towards Savage Mountain. He swung his hand and struck out again and again. Lightning pearls of poison bombarded Savage Mountain one after another. The booms rang out constantly, like a thunderstorm. In the valley, the night roamers gazed at the sky in fright. Within the surging poisonous mist, bolts of green lightning danced about like dragons and snakes, constantly battering against the formations. Any single bolt of lightning would be a disaster for them. Myriad poison ancestor. He really is a great cultivator, after all. What he's capable of is not something we can match up to. Yu Wufeng stood on the top of the mountain. His white hair drifted in the wind as he was stern. Boss Yu, now's not the time to praise others. If the myriad poison ancestor kills his way in, we'll all be doomed. The gentleman of heavenly blubber also arrived at the top of the mountain to watch. His fat jiggled as a sliver of fear filled his face. An opponent like that was not something he could contend with at all. Even when he hid in the formation, he struggled to feel safe at all. Fellow cultivators, please block the attack. Yi Liusu flew over. The blood oath doesn't require us to throw our lives at the myriad poison cult. I think the banyan tree king is in charge of the formation. There's no need for us to do anything. Yu Wufeng snorted coldly inside. If it's Li Qingshan, then so be it, but an other folk who has just undergone the tribulation dares to order me around? Yi Liusu frowned. Then she looked at the other cave masters. None of them had any intentions of doing anything either, smiling at her. Ha! The blood oath doesn't have a clause like that. However, once our king returns and gives the order, we'll still have to throw our lives at him. The best outcome is just the myriad poison ancestor taking the blood oath scroll away. I don't care, anyway. It doesn't matter who I become a dog. At worst, I'll just follow the ancestor to attack the South Sea Sword Pavilion. The gentleman of heavenly blubber smiled. Yu Wufeng's face changed. With the blood oath scroll in Li Qingshan's hands, there was still a chance for him to regain his freedom. If he ended up in the myriad poison ancestor's hands, he would truly be in a state of utter misery. He would not be able to die, and it would be detrimental to the South Sea Sword Pavilion. With a clang, the fogbow sword was drawn from its sheath. It went from 1 to 10, then from 10 to 100, conjuring streaks of white light that pierced the depths of the poisonous cloud. Although they were all eaten away in the blink of an eye, they depleted the poisonous cloud and nullified the attacks from the lightning bead of myriad poison. Puppy you of the South Sea Sword Pavilion, I've destroyed the formation. I'll cut off your dog, head first, as a sacrifice to the flag. The myriad poison ancestor could not see the situation on Savage Mountain, but he recognized the sword style and fogbow sword chi of the South Sea Sword Pavilion. Originally, he had dragged all his disciples out so that they could show off their might, but he never expected the formation of Savage Mountain to actually be so tough. The way it operated was extremely ingenious, without the slightest opening. He could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Old dog myriad poison, get through this formation first. Yu Wufeng said. At this moment, the gentleman of heavenly blubber moved too. He sucked in a deep breath, and fierce wind surged into it. His mountainous body swelled up, becoming like a huge ball of flesh. He swelled to the limit and suddenly opened his mouth, spitting out a streak of sticky, scorching, blood-red light. It rushed into the air and actually pierced the poisonous cloud, creating a huge hole. His mountainous body shrank as he gasped for air. Yu Wufen glanced at him in surprise. He never expected him to actually go all out. The gentleman of heavenly blubber smiled. Since I can't avoid being a dog, I have to find a good family. Although Li Qingshan and Little and were in possession of the blood oath scroll, they did not oppress them too much. Even when they attacked various parts of the south, they possessed an absolute advantage. Not only was there no danger, but they even shared some of the benefits. Li Qingshan had no intention of founding a sect or establishing some sort of organization in the south, but the gentleman of heavenly blubber was intrigued. He proactively advised Li Qingshan on one hand, and he also established connections with the various cave masters on the other. He wanted to establish Savage Mountain into a true sect. He ranked second among the 10 cave masters, while Yu Wufeng stood aloof. He only wanted to return to the South Sea Sword Pavilion. Although the night roamers were favored and trusted by Li Qingshan, there was a natural barrier between them and the cave masters. They basically never interfered with one another, no matter how he thought about it. His position actually felt a little like a caretaker. If he really could establish Savage Mountain into an organization of its own, then he would be a figure with actual authority to help the King of Savages govern Savage Mountain. And after a period of contact, he discovered that Li Qingshan was not a dishonest, demonic cultivator. Since he had said there was a chance to remove the blood oath, he was not joking around. By then, not only would he regain his freedom, but there was even a chance for him, the caretaker, to become the second king of savages. Then he said, "Our king is about to return, yet you still haven't taken action? Are you waiting for our king to give a personal order?" As a result, another 3 cave masters who were relatively close to him took action. Why would the remaining people be bold enough to be a role model? Whether they were willing or not, all they could do was take action. Chapter 806. Qian Liangmu went up to assist without another word. With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a lightning bead of myriad poison. It collided with the streak of light and nullified each other. Didn't I say you could watch? The myriad poison ancestor looked over with his green eyes and said in displeasure, "I've watched Master demonstrate the supreme skills of the cult, so I've been itching to make a fool of myself. Please guide me, Master. Once we return to the cult, I'm willing to accept punishment." Qian Liangmu said politely. Praise filled the leader of the myriad poison cult's eyes. With a wave of his hand, he said, "So be it. I'll let you mess around this time." Before he had even finished speaking, the people of the myriad poison cult called out, "Please guide me, Master. We're willing to accept punishment." They swarmed over together, either using arcane artifacts or techniques, all bombarding Savage Mountain. For a moment, light filled the surroundings. With the combined strength of an entire sect, the pressure on the protective formation immediately increased drastically. "Senior Tree King, may I ask how much longer you can last?" Yi Liusu was worried, asking the Banyan Tree King for guidance. "Not too long. If nothing goes wrong, a year or so should be no problem." The Banyan Tree King swayed his branches and said in an ancient voice, "But with your assistance right now, it can last a little longer." Huh. Yi Liusu was taken aback. She never expected the Banyan Tree Kings, not too long, to be so long. It was impossible for the myriad poison cult to spend a year or so on Savage Mountain. It would already be impressive if they could last a few days. And the Banyan Tree King had clearly made a conservative estimate. In other words, it was impossible for the myriad poison cult to breach Savage Mountain. When the cave masters heard that, they could not help but work even harder. Fortunately, they did not turn down the offer just now, or they would definitely be punished once Li Qingshan returned. They sighed in amazement inside. The Banyan Tree King really does live up to his reputation. With him presiding over the formation, probably only the King of Southern you can breach Savage Mountain with a group of people. You guessed right. It really is the 10,000 poison cult. That old poisonous thing really can't tolerate me. Li Qingshan stood on the cloud and gazed at Savage Mountain, which was shrouded in poisonous mist. Seeing how it was not the King of Southern you, he still let out a sigh of relief. With the Banyan Tree King presiding over the protective formation, it definitely could not be taken down by a single myriad poison ancestor. What should we do? Little An asked. We obviously won't lose if we work together. Killing this group of disciples isn't a problem, but it'll be very difficult for us to keep the myriad poison ancestor here. Right now is not the time for us to openly clash with him, but it's impolite not to reciprocate. Let's go to the headquarters of the myriad poison cult. Li Qingshan took little and flew away. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly felt uneasy. He looked at the horizon, but all he saw were white clouds. No matter how he thought about it, he did not feel like there was anything that could threaten him. So he made up his mind and continued his assault on Savage Mountain. Yinqing, come out. Yinqing was currently cultivating in the Azura field when Li Qingshan's voice suddenly rang out by her ear. She had already been moved outside the Azura field. I have a mission for you. I wonder if your arts of escaping through space can pass through the formation below. Yinqing followed Li Qingshan's finger and looked in the direction that Li Qingshan was pointing at. All she saw was a huge basin below. Within the pale green miasma sat a series of majestic buildings that rose and fell. They were all dyed dark green and gave off a sinister aura. Sure. Yinqing studied it for a while and nodded in response. As an Azura from the Azura realm, she possessed arts of escaping through space that regular Azura could not grasp. The formations of the myriad poison cult were powerful, but they could not stop her from infiltrating them. Then can you destroy the formations from the inside? Li Qingshan took a step further and asked. No, Yinqing said. Little and said, regular formations are relatively easier to destroy from the inside, but the formations of the myriad poison cult restrict both the inside and the outside. If you try to forcefully destroy them, you'll definitely die from the backlash. That's fine. As long as you can get in, that's enough, Li Qingshan said. Who's my target? Yinqing asked. Everyone. Li Qingshan then corrected himself. Not just the people, but the items too. Anyway, you have to destroy them as much as possible. All of the spoils will go to you. Yes, sir. Yinqing accepted the order and took a step, vanishing. She appeared over 5 kilometers away and arrived in the northwestern corner of the myriad poison cult with a few flashes. Afterwards, she used her arts of escaping through space and infiltrated there silently. Littleland said, if that's the case, I'll have to fight the myriad poison cult to the death. Li Qingshan said, he can't get through my shield, but I have a spear that can pierce his shield. I obviously have to make good use of it. Little and nodded. In terms of assassination techniques, Yinqing surpasses the night roamers. Apart from the myriad poison ancestor himself, there aren't a lot of people in the myriad poison cult who can survive her assassination. The Azura realm is a higher world, after all, one of the 6 realms of Sasra. In terms of experience in battle and slaughter, even I'm nowhere close to her. If I can gain a few more Azura commanders as subordinates, I'll definitely be much more powerful than those cave lords. I wonder if I can use the Azura field to summon the Azura King one day. Li Qingshan glanced at the azure field in his hand before casting his gaze at the myriad poison cult below. It'll be up to her performance next. The myriad poison ancestor had led all the elders and disciples of the cult out, but the cult was still very lively. Most of them were outer disciples who had yet to undergo the first heavenly tribulation, and a few protectors remained in the cult. Kong Ming happened to be one of them. Today, it was his turn to pass on the path of cultivation to the outer disciples. He sat under the dripping eaves, facing a square made of limestone. Several hundred disciples stood sternly listening attentively. There was a gentle breeze, and the bronze bells on the eaves jingled. The sunlight shone down, covering the stone beasts on the eaves with a halo. He was rather fed up with this job. He wasted his precious time on these pieces of trash. In another 3 years, not even a third of them would still be standing here. And after going through the various selections, there might not even be a single person who could reach his position in the end. However, he could not ignore the rules of the cult, so he spoke patiently as his eyes darted around among the disciples. In this generation, there were a few disciples who were rather good-looking. He could play around with them when he had the time. The warm wind blew, the sun shone brightly, and he was in the absolute safety of the sect. So he seemed extremely relaxed. He even felt a little tipsy. When a coldness suddenly filled his heart, he was slightly taken aback. He lowered his head, only to see a circular blade around his neck glistening under the sunlight. Kill! The myriad poison ancestor had been attacking Savage Mountain for so long, so he gradually became anxious. He also found it rather strange. With his cultivation and mental fortitude, even if he could not take down Savage Mountain, he should not be behaving like this. Had he failed to account for something? And it had already been so long, so why hadn't Li Qingshan returned yet? He believed that as long as Li Qingshan appeared, he definitely would not be able to escape his senses. Then, he would be able to capture the leader. Even if he could not take down Savage Mountain, it would not matter. Right as he thought about it, his heart skipped a beat. Oh no! Disciples of the myriad poison cult would all be implanted with the poison heart goo the moment they became inner disciples. It could drastically increase their cultivation speed and make it easier to control goo insects. At the same time, it was also a method of control, preventing them from betraying the cult. Once they were killed, they would sense it too. Chapter 807. Master, what's wrong? Qian Liangmu used techniques again and again to support the myriad poison ancestor. Suddenly, he saw the myriad poison ancestor's expression change drastically, so he could not help but ask, "Return to the myriad poison cult." The myriad poison ancestor had no time to explain. He turned into a streak of green light and flew back to the myriad poison cult. The other disciples, elders, and so on were all clueless. They all flew back with the myriad poison ancestor. The surroundings of Savage Mountain below had been corroded by the poisonous cloud and bombarded by techniques, reduced to a wasteland. However, Savage Mountain was completely unscathed. The cloud and mist surged without dispersing. Seeing the people of the myriad poison cult suddenly retreat, the night roamers and the 10 cave masters were all confused. They were all surprised. Yi Liusu asked the Banyan Tree King for guidance again. "Senior, the myriad poison cult has suddenly retreated. Is there some scheme behind it?" The Banyan Tree King understood everything. He smiled. "Your king must have come up with some scheme to lure them away." Yi Liusu stopped worrying. Even if the myriad poison cult had any schemes, they would be completely exposed before the Banyan Tree King, who was renowned for his wisdom. Li Qingshan had pulled him over to watch over Savage Mountain, so it was as safe as it could be. The myriad poison ancestor flew quickly. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Another 2 inner sect disciples had died, and they had been in the myriad poison cult. His face could not help but change drastically, and he sped up again. Just what has happened? The formations haven't been triggered. They had no idea what had happened in the strife, but they were afraid of abandoning. He could not be blamed for having doubts like that. If the without destroying the formations of Savage Mountain, even the king of Southern knew, they would basically be cutting off the foundation of the descendants of the cult. Of course, they were just overthinking. Probably just the name of the Shadow Queen of the Night Roamers possessed was enough to deter any cave masters from taking this risk. The Shadow Palace's although they had not come across any actual danger in this battle, they were apart from Ghost Shadow. They all had never heard of any Night Roamers operating there. A while later, the Shadow Queen would never take action so easily. He held the let alone oppose a large gazed in the direction like the myriad poison cult. The myriad poison ancestor returned to the basin. My king must have lured the myriad poison green miasma and landed disciples in the myriad poison cult. So they'll definitely fall behind. The heavy smell of blood without the geographical advantage. They won't be able to recover much of their and fresh blood flows alone, dyeing the limestone square red. And take a look. The corpses were all headless. The gentleman in the middle of the plaza said there was a pyramid made of several hundred heads. Quite a lot of his fat again. They were all disciples of the 10,000 poison 250 and the kilograms. One at the very top was Fatty, Protector Wei. You sure are cunning. Under the red light of the setting sun. To he my died death? With everlasting regret. Said coldly, his expression even without the myriad poison ancestor. Behind how was the pyramid of human head against on the blue shadow wall, and the others 5 words all were by himself. In blood. Once he was kept busy, respectfully. Once the myriad poison bloody words had yet to dry, returned as they flowed he really down. Would have no idea the myriad how he died. Poison ancestor's not exactly. Face reddened. It's not like I know how to ride to green. Sword. So it's not easy for me. His eyes shone with venomous if you can kill a few people from the myriad poison words from between you'll be doing a great service for Savage Mountain. He waved his with palm my king's fiercely. Clear distinction and the pyramid of human heads and along with the screen wall were all turned into powder. His chest the gentleman down of heavenly blubber before he could calm down. He suddenly said, "Eager for not good to run into the myriad poison his 2 senior brothers and die outside. 3 direct disciples. He would be the rightful first cave master of Savage myriad poison cult. Li Qingshan would be the king of savages, while they were obviously much slower. However, than the myriad that was not a lie." You when the myriad not an poison idiot. Ancestor so why would he fall for the myriad sure poison enough, cult? They had not even gazed at the gentleman of the heavenly blubber deeply and became tempted. And the others were all with his strength. As long as he did not run into the myriad poison ancestor directly, he would not be in too much danger. Let's work together. A black figure appeared. Ghost Shadow was rather confident in his techniques of stealth. He was confident that as long as he did not clash with the myriad poison ancestor, he would be able to protect himself. He had been tempted by what the gentleman of heavenly blubber had said, so he wanted to see whether there was any merit he could earn. All right. Yu Wufeng made up his mind. He slapped the fogbow sword and stood up with it in hand. He fused with the sword and turned into a streak of white light flying off. Let's go too. Yi Liusu said before merging into the darkness with Yi Liuxing and Yi Liubua tailing after him. The myriad poison ancestor rode a great green cloud together, currently flying towards the myriad poison cult. A streak of light pursued them from behind. but they were still over 5 kilometers away. Yu Wufeng's eyes narrowed, and he brought his fingers together like a sword, gently brushing past the fogbow sword. Sword chi flowed in the surroundings, and his white hair drifted about. Suddenly, he stabbed out. An extremely resplendent streak of white light shot towards the green cloud. He only hoped to keep the people of the myriad poison cult here for a moment, so that Ghost Shadow could find an opportunity to strike. If he could kill a few disciples of the myriad poison cult, that would obviously be for the best. The streak of light shot into the green cloud. The green cloud that seemed extremely soft-surged and actually devoured and digested the streak of light with ease. Yu Wufeng came to a halt and frowned. The myriad poison cult really did have some tricks up their sleeves. They did not just gather together randomly. Instead, they merged their powers together, vaguely forming some sort of formation. Even Ghost Shadow probably would not be bold enough to venture deep and carry out an assassination. Qian Liangmu flew out of the green cloud and smiled. "Have you come to see me off, Cave Master Yu?" "That's right. I've long heard of the poisonous young master's great name. You stand alongside my junior brother, Peng Jingni, as a hero. Are you bold enough to face me in battle today?" Yu Wufeng stood with his sword. He had noticed the myriad poison ancestor was not around a long time ago, so he spoke with composure. However, he also considered whether to advance or retreat inside. He probably could not take advantage of the situation this time. However, leaving was only a matter of a word. The fogbow sword moved extremely quickly, so these people definitely could not catch up to him. Qian Liangmu said, "Cave Master Yu's courage is admirable. You're even more suited to be the next pavilion master of the South Sea Sword Pavilion than your junior brother. It's just a pity that you're bound by a blood oath, which is quite a pity. Junior brother, are you going to collude with the enemy in front of so many disciples? Don't waste your breath on him. Go kill this puppy from the South Sea Sword Pavilion." The centipede man said impatiently. Qian Liangmu originally wanted to mock Yu Wufeng a little, hoping that he would charge over forcefully, but he never expected to be interrupted by his senior brother first. He became furious. "Senior brother wants me to die with him, but I just won't let you have your way." Yu Wufeng was originally the first senior brother of the South Sea Sword Pavilion, while senior brother is also the first senior brother of our myriad poison cult. We should decide who's stronger today. Stop arguing, senior brothers. You've made a fool out of yourself for no reason. Let's just ignore this kid and hurry back to the myriad poison cult. There will be a day when we claim his life in the future. The Spider Woman urged. It was also like a Buddhist chant. The Spider Woman urged. Righteous and she righteous, received the agreement delivering of the all elders life from suffering and protectors when too. He heard it, even they were rather worried about the myriad poison immediately shut off his sense of hearing. But even if you can escort someone for 1,000 kilometers, louder and they'll still have to part boundless in the end. And please return. Cave Since when did the South possess an ability like come that? Again in the future. Yu Wufeng gazed into the Liangmu distance. Clasped his hands. Red glow in the he west personally seemed to be burning. That as a member of the royal clan, over he would not be as vulgar as these southern barbarians. Golden light flashed. He would always like a bright star rising up in the night sky, no matter what, growing brighter and brighter, growing this closer and closer. Only the 10 cave masters could stand a chance against him. The Spider Woman when he cried out involuntarily, resolutely. If it was said that a strange sound felt shock rang out then by the members of the myriad the sound was like a dragon's cry. Enough the to stun ghosts they controlled rippled, ringing through the clouds, vaguely showing signs of shattering. It was no longer as relaxed as it was when it swallowed Yu Wufeng's sword. Little and was covered in brilliant light, but it was unable to conceal her dazzling golden light. Her bluish-white monk's robes rippled as she flew towards the green cloud. She opened her mouth slightly and unleashed the secret technique of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga that even the Golden Cicada Spirit King had to find a way to secretly learn. The Chan of Devanaga, her pair of spectral eyes were unfazed, seeing through all forms and space, comprehending the mysteries of the Buddhist Dharma. She pushed this Buddhist secret technique to the limit, but what she used was the path of white bone and great beauty that could destroy all Buddhas. It's her. Qian Liangmu gazed at the unforgettable face in the distance. He struggled to imagine that such a tremendous and profound voice actually came from the mouth of a petite woman like her. He had heard a long time ago that she was the most outstanding disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga in the past 1,000 years, yet she had risked everything to come to the south with Li Qingshan and risk her life. Under the great name of the King of Savages, she had remained silent the entire time, willing to serve as a foil which made people unable to help but underestimate or even overlook her. After all, she had only undergone the second heavenly tribulation recently. Even if she was a genius, her strength was still limited. Only now did he come to a sudden realization that she was actually so powerful. She no longer seemed as obedient and pleasant as before. The bearing she gave off actually eclipsed all of them. She's that little or whatever beside Li Qingshan. Perfect timing. Capture her and ask for a reward from Master. The centipede man pursed his lips in excitement. He had basically never heard of such great beauty. Perhaps he could even get close to her. Kill this bitch, the spider woman called out, her face filled with jealousy. Idiot! Qian Liangmu no longer cared about his bearing as a prince and cursed aloud, but his face was filled with shock. Chapter 808. Qian Liangmu's heart suddenly leapt into his throat. Those who had never seen Li Qingshan definitely could not. He wanted to experience the power and influence this man possessed. In terms of cultivation alone, every single elder and protector here surpassed him. As a result, while he possessed startling accomplishments in battle, it was very difficult for him to take the name King of Savages too seriously based on what he had heard. Just like how the myriad poison ancestor did not care about how the banyan tree king referred to him as fellow, all the cultivators who had reached their realm of cultivation were talented prodigies. All of them had gone through many years of arduous cultivation. All of them were confident in their own strength. No matter what, Li Qingshan was far too young, in his 30s. Qian Liangmu might seem like a young master on the surface, but according to the seniority of mortals, he was more than enough to be Li Qingshan's grandfather. The mighty greatest sect of the South had gathered their elites together. Even if the myriad poison ancestor was not present, why would they be afraid of a mere Li Qingshan's ambush? That was what they thought, and that was what the myriad poison ancestor thought too, which was why he left without worrying about their safety at all. However, Qian Liangmu had personally seen Li Qingshan and experienced the difference between them, so he understood fear. Since Li Qingshan was bold enough to draw away the myriad poison ancestor and purposefully intercept them here, he must have been quite confident. Glancing around, there were mountains and forests that rose and fell as far as the eye could see. Li Qingshan could be hiding anywhere. The vast surroundings suddenly became filled with killing intent, suffocating them. Little and pressed forward like a dazzling star, flying over from the western horizon. The chant of Devanaga became deeper and clearer, echoing through the surroundings. Even with the green clouds in the way, the elders and protectors felt their blood surge. They struggled to even focus their soul senses. The regular disciples were even worse off. They clutched their heads and collapsed on the clouds. They felt like their souls had been tossed into surging waves, about to be ripped apart and annihilated at any time. So, this is the supreme cultivation technique of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, the Chan of Devanaga. Sure enough, it's something. Oh no, we can't let her continue using it. Let's strike together and take her down. As he spoke little and was already within 10 miles, the power of the chant of Devanaga was unleashed to the extreme, and he had no intention of slowing down at all. In just a breath's time, the two sides would officially engage in battle. The 10,000 poison cult's disciples were itching to give it a try. Just as they were about to attack, they suddenly felt their bodies become heavy, as if they were about to be pulled down from the sky. Their bodies staggered. The green cloud surged and was on the verge of collapse, and those normal disciples who were already suppressed by the chant of Devanaga in the first place spat out blood, feeling like their organs were about to rupture. Qian Liangmu's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly raised his head. They're here. Amidst the white clouds, in the depths of the sky that was dyed red by the multicolored light, a black dot appeared. It was rapidly enlarging and falling at an unbelievable speed. The strong wind whistled past Li Qingshan's ears. Wisps of white turbulence appeared around Li Qingshan's body, leaving the white clouds far behind him. The dark green land blew in his face. He unfurled his wings of wind to the limit, and the flames of the phoenix blazed. Wind and fire merged together, dragging behind him like a long, glowing tail of a comet. After undergoing the phoenix's nerva and rebirth in fire, he unleashed this form again, but it was much faster and much more powerful than before. In the blink of an eye, the 10,000 poison cult had already arrived before him. He could clearly see the shock on their faces. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled into a smile. He spread open the fingers on his right hand and bent his right arm backwards. Have you ever heard of a palm style that descends from the sky? From the moment Qian Liangmu saw Li Qingshan, the sense of danger he had developed from experiencing countless life-or-death situations basically roared out. He took out a great shifting talisman he had been saving up for a very long time without any regard and activated it. However, his seniors and juniors, as well as the elders and protectors, clearly did not believe there was a need for that. His two seniors and juniors even mocked his cowardice inside, thinking about how they should report him to the myriad poison ancestor. An elder beamed with joy. He pointed at the sky and bellowed, "He's the king of savages, Li Qingshan. Take him down quickly. We've really searched far and wide for him, only to find him right before our eyes. There's a path in heaven, yet you refuse to take it, yet you barge into hell." Seriously, Li Qingshan slammed down with his palm, suddenly turning into a colossal palm. The huge shadow it cast down enveloped all of the myriad poison cult, crushing down like a mountain. Bang! The green cloud shattered, and there were many muffled explosions inside. Clouds of bloody mist rose up. Li Qingshan's descent slowed down. He unfurled his wings and folded them up, landing gently on the ground. He dispersed his demonic armor, and his scarlet eyes turned pitch black. His right hand returned to normal too. He swung it around and exhaled gently. This move is powerful, but it sure takes up quite a lot of energy and demon chi. Fortunately, my control over my power has indeed become much more refined after the phoenix's nerva. In the past, I'd have to smash into the ground before I could stop. Yu Wufeng widened his eyes and opened his mouth, unable to return to his senses for quite a while. After cultivating for all these years, he personally believed he was knowledgeable. He had seen all sorts of strange things, but he had never been as surprised as he was today. From the moment Little N appeared, he had been prepared to provide support. After all, she was in possession of the Blood Oath Scroll. When Li Qingshan descended from above, he swung the fogbow sword, ready to put on a good show. However, before he could even unleash a sword technique, Li Qingshan had already flown over with a swish. Who knew how many times faster than when he rode his sword? And then the myriad poison cult was gone. 2 direct disciples, 3 protectors, 5 elders, as well as dozens of inner court disciples. All of them had vanished from the world. If it weren't for the faint smell of blood drifting in the wind, he would have suspected that the 10,000 poison cult had used some sort of miraculous mass teleportation technique. Even though he had witnessed it with his own eyes, he still struggled to believe it. The core elites of the myriad poison cult had all been slapped to death by a single palm strike like this. Ghost Shadow could not help but emerge from his concealment. His expression was no different from Yu Wufeng's. The strength of the ox and tiger, the speed of the phoenix, coupled with the tremors of the ox demon, the gravity of the earth, and the wings of wind formed a terrifying force, let alone a group of second or first heavenly tribulation cultivators. Even the myriad poison ancestor would be heavily injured if he managed to survive that strike. Of course, it was basically impossible for him to land a strike like this in a battle of the same level. Even with the suppression of strength, Li Qingshan wanted to make little and bait the enemies first, making them stay where they were and distract them. He made the spirit turtle calculate for a very long time before striking out boldly, launching a palm strike like this. And the outcome of being struck by his strike was no longer as simple as being reduced to mincemeat. All of their bones and flesh would be completely destroyed, reduced to a bloody mist. Coincidentally, the moment Li Qingshan landed on the ground, Little and flew over. She swung the Bloodsea banner and sucked the bloody mist and souls into it. Chapter 809. In the evening sky, a few stars had already opened their eyes silently, gazing over coldly. The world! A streak of green light swept past and suddenly halted. The myriad poison ancestor's expression changed drastically, becoming filled with disbelief. He murmured, "Impossible, impossible. Just who is it?" He refused to believe that Li Qingshan possessed the ability to do so. It was exactly this wrong assessment that made him pay a heavy price. He gritted his teeth, and a layer of green appeared on his face. He sped up and flew away without any regard for the cost of his cultivation. When he was close to where the people of the myriad poison cult had died, he suddenly heard a call from below. "Master, I'm here." Who was it? Who did it? The myriad poison ancestor arrived beside Qian Liangmu in a flash and grabbed him by the shoulder, asking viciously, It was Li Qingshan. Just him. And that little and used the chant of Devanaga to intercept us. I sensed that something was amiss, so I used a great shifting talisman. Don't tell me, Qian Liangmu had escaped, but just now he still doubted whether he had made a mistake. He was worried about how he was supposed to explain things to the myriad poison ancestor if Li Qingshan was not as dangerous as his instincts told him. Only now did he finally confirm he was right when he saw the myriad poison ancestor's expression, and the situation seemed to be even more severe than he had imagined. It's not such a troublesome opponent. Did none of them escape? It would not be impossible for the foundation of Savage Mountain to be destroyed in a day. Ancestor glared at Qian, said Liangmu. The world is vast. I deserve to die, and there are as many powerful people as there are clouds. Qian, however, Liangmu said, we won't be at the mercy of others. It's already impressive that you managed to escape. We must repay them tenfold. Once I ascend, in the Azure you'll be the next leader of the myriad poison cult. What's your relationship with that Li guy? Don't let me down. We've worked so hard. The myriad poison ancestor benefits the most. And gradually calmed emotionally. He gazed in the direction of Savage Mountain with a sunken face. Average strength Master, and low what should we do now? He was King Liangmu. Had no idea whether he should laugh or cry now that he had attained what he had been dreaming and smiled. He asked carefully. Every single one of the dark green and the others had probably fled back condensed to Savage Mountain powerful spiritual energy. When Li Qingshan was These were the main spoils even if they gathered the strength of the entire myriad of the protector elders, they still could not take down Savage Mountain. Let to their poison affinity, when only the two were useless to Li Qingshan. They would just be asking to be humiliated if they went. However, 10 poisonous he was not bold enough to say that to the myriad save 1,000 years of time. However, his status as a demon commander was already set in stone, not a mediocre person, and his chances of becoming a demon king had increased such a drastically. which was why he was filled with admiration for now this treatment. That he had been dealt a heavy blow. Even more he had admiration already made up his mind. Now you go back to if she returned to the Azura to hold down one day. Following I want to go somewhere. King, I will not this rest did not seem until like I crush Li Qingshan's bones and right scatter his ashes. She should properly enjoy this rare vacation. The myriad poison ancestor down actually has an attack and took out an so much for rushing back from in a pile of 100 treasures. Li Qingshan stood pinched at the top of the tall tower on the main peak of Savage Mountain with spiritual water. He shaded his eyes. She filled with his hand and gazed at the sky. Curled up. All he saw was the setting sun wafted through the air. The sky was as dark as ink, no longer moonlight was like the poisonous cores. He's a sect master after all. He stared straight at the teacup. He won't be so unwise. Yin Qing put down the sat on the edge of the tower. You're so disgusting. The stars reflected in his eyes as his long hair drifted in the night breeze. I'll treat you to a cup. Fair enough. Your Majesty. What a pity. The cave masters I was planning on cursing your arrival at the Wild Li Qingshan looked away. They invite and set him over to give them instructions. He won't just swallow his anger. Arrived at the main. We still need to take and clasped his hands towards Li Qingshan. As long as the king of Southern, his attitude had become extremely respectful. Although he had lost to Li Qingshan in the past. And was forced to swear a banyan tree king's side. He had always been rather reluctant to accept it. I'll have to worry about this kid again. He just felt like Li Qingshan did not make him stay behind with his own strength. And said, however, after the battle today, his mind had become extremely shaken. The South Sea Sword Pavilion and the myriad poison cult had been at odds for many years. They had always treated each other as mortal enemies. Countless hot-blooded battles and tragic sacrifices had been written between the South and the South Sea. As it turned out, it was all because of a single palm strike from him. Even if I undergo the third heavenly tribulation, I'm not his opponent. But the most terrifying part is that he's only in his 30s. Not only was he shocked by Li Qingshan's great strength, but he also felt like his worldview had been shattered and his horizons had been broadened. Li Qingshan leapt down. Let's go. The Savage King Hall was a hall built by the gentlemen of Heavenly Blubber on Savage Mountain. It was made from 1,000,000 tons of black basalt, sitting majestically on the mountain ridge. It had not been sculpted, but it gave off a primitive, savage aura. It seemed especially deep under the night sky. In the center of the hall was a black rock throne. Below it were 10 slightly smaller seats to the left and right. The 9 cave masters had already taken their seats. Apart from Ghost Shadow, who remained silent, the other cave masters discussed and communicated with one another. The gentleman of Heavenly Blubber was the most active. At this moment, a tall figure appeared at the entrance of the hall. Li Qingshan strode in. The cave masters stood up at the same time, bowing and clasping their hands. Greetings, my king. Their unified voices echoed through the empty hall, filled with similar fear and respect. Li Qingshan walked past them and arrived before the black throne, examining it. The throne stood high up, its base fused with the ground. According to the aesthetics of the South, it was carved into many skeletons. However, the back of the throne was jagged like a sword, black rock that had not been carved. It stabbed straight into the sky. Li Qingshan shook his head. It's just a rock. Chapter 8:11. The cave masters looked at one another and exchanged glances. They secretly communicated with their soul sense, what a way this woman speaks. With her cultivation, she's actually saying she wants to destroy the fire devourers. Even if she undergoes the second heavenly tribulation, she's not even enough for the fire-devouring king to burn. Are you serious? You're not joking? Li Qingshan was rather surprised too. As it turned out, his hopes for Ru Xian were just to understand the inside story of the merfolk of the South Sea through her, and then find a way to convince the merfolk king to send troops to attack Fire Melt Mountain. He never thought she would want to destroy the fire devourers right off the bat. He stared into Ru Xian's eyes, trying to see through her thoughts. That's the only thing I won't joke about. Though, give me some time. I need to undergo the second heavenly tribulation, said Ru Xian. I don't want to believe you, but fine then. If there's anything you need, feel free to ask. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. He felt like her attitude had changed really quickly. She had gone from resolutely opposing it in the beginning to resolutely supporting it now. It was confusing. First of all, gather as much information as you can on the recent movements of the merfolk of the South Sea and the fire devourers, but don't alert them. Don't take on an opposing stance against Firemelt Mountain or get close to the merfolk of the South Sea. Secondly, capture some fire devourers for me. They don't have to be too powerful, but you have to keep it a secret. It's best if they mistakenly believe it was done by them. Finally, I need to gather a few things. I need everyone's cooperation. Ru Xian spoke with confidence and composure. Clearly, she had a plan in mind. Li Qingshan did not ask what she wanted to do. He agreed to everything and ordered the cave masters to cooperate. The cave masters were reluctant to be ordered around by a Foundation establishment cultivator, but these tasks were still better than risking their lives against the fire devourers. Who knew when she would undergo the second heavenly tribulation? By then, perhaps Li Qingshan would have already cooled down and no longer wanted to attack Firemelt Mountain. The cave masters accepted their orders and dispersed. Only Li Qingshan and Ru Xian remained in the gloomy hall. Their eyes met. Li Qingshan wanted to say something, but he suddenly waved his hand. Forget it. You can say it when you want to say it. I want to talk about it now. Ru Xian smiled. Then, but since you want to hear it so much, I feel like I'll be at a disadvantage if I tell you. Ru Xian twirled a strand of her hair. Damn you! Li Qingshan cursed and laughed again. You finally returned to normal, although there was a hint of fierceness in his voice. Have I ever been abnormal? Ru Xian blinked her eyes, turned around, and waved her hand. I'm going to attend to my business. Young man, just sit on the chair and wait. Watching Ru Xian leave, Li Qingshan leaned against the armrest and supported his head with his hand. He asked, Did you say something to her? It's nothing. She just said you're determined to attack Firemelt Mountain and take the divine Wudong tree for cultivation, which made her happy. Little and sat sideways on the armrest and reached out to touch Li Qingshan's cheek. You don't have to eat her now. Li Qingshan gently scooped her into his arms with a smile. I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it. Humph, who likes to chew rocks? At the same time, the myriad poison ancestor moved through the pitch-black jungle. He slowed down, as if there would be a trap with every step he took. There was not a single person in the surroundings, but he could clearly sense countless prying eyes. He remained calm and composed. He believed the person he wanted to see would appear very soon. Suddenly, he stopped. The darkness became thicker and thicker, like a pool of black water surging in the silence. In this extreme darkness, even the surrounding environment became grotesque and motley. The trees twisted vaguely, like drifting silhouettes, imprinted in the darkness even darker than the darkness. Shadowy, black plants grew around the myriad poison ancestor. They were densely packed, with huge buds on the slender stems. Thousands of buds bloomed at the same time, but what bloomed were not flowers, but mouths with crisscrossed fangs. They said together, Let's go. Myriad poison, why aren't you enjoying yourself in the south? Why have you come to my shadow palace? Every single voice was ear-piercing. Thousands of them stacked together, enough to make people want to go deaf. Even the myriad poison ancestor became slightly restless. He made up his mind. I want to ask you to kill someone for me, fellow. Oh, someone I can kill but can't. You should know that the Shadow Palace never assassinates targets above the third heavenly tribulation, whether it's humans, demons, or other folk, or half human, half demons, half human, half other folk, or half other folk, half demons. The Shadow Queen spoke extremely quickly. Her shadow rose up and formed a triplet in the air. Every stroke turned into the silhouettes of humans, demons, and other folk before rapidly weaving together to form so-called half-human, half-demons, and so on. No, not the third heavenly tribulation, but the second heavenly tribulation. Oh, that's interesting. Name? Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor struggled to hide his resentment. The king of savages, Li Qingshan. I refuse. Please return. The Shadow Queen seemed to consider it before turning him down firmly. Her shadow drew a cross in the air before drifting away. Hold on, you still haven't heard my reward. The myriad poison ancestor took a step forward and extended his hand. The shadow plants suddenly merged into a colossal shadow monster, blocking the myriad poison ancestor's path. It roared out, "Did the king of Southern you send you? Does he want to drag the night roamers into the war between humans? Go back and tell him he can forget about it. I wish him the best of luck forever. I wish him that his own kind will chop off his head." No, this has nothing to do with the king of Southern you, the Mist Province, or even the Green Province. It's all about me. The myriad poison ancestor hesitated before finally revealing his grievances with Li Qingshan. To him, this was a great humiliation that he struggled to mention. The shadow monster let out a strange cackle from time to time. In the end, it said, "Infiltrating the myriad poison cult and killing people, I suspect it's the handiwork of that ghost shadow from Savage Mountain." Hee, so you're talking about that child. I've let him rest up. It's time for him to come back and continue working. Thank you for telling me about him. I'll bring him back. Night roamers shouldn't be enslaved by others, but I don't think he has the ability. If you kill Li Qingshan, I'll shoulder all the blame. I'll announce that I was the one who took action. If you don't believe me, I can swear a venomous oath and take full responsibility for this matter. You'll receive 3 arcane treasures at the very least, as well as tremendous resources. The myriad poison ancestor said firmly. The venomous oath he spoke of was not an empty, venomous oath that mortals made. Instead, it was an oath that possessed great power. Unlike the Blood Oath Scroll, it could only take effect out of complete willingness. After a moment of silence, the shadow monster shrank and turned into a blurry figure. It sat in front of the myriad poison ancestor and rubbed its head with its slender arm. All right, let's talk about the reward now. Quite a while later, the thick darkness receded like the tide. The jungle returned to normal. The myriad poison ancestor looked around. Even in the end, he was unable to grasp the Shadow Queen's location. A bright moon hung in the sky. On the branch of a huge tree, a pair of deep blue eyes watched the myriad poison ancestor fly off into the distance. She fiddled around with a tumor-like, dark green sphere in her hand and smiled gently. The night wind seemed to chill slightly. He looked around and experienced an ominous feeling for some reason. Old hag, you better be prepared to die of old age in bed," the Shadow Queen said viciously. She raised her head and gazed over. Though this tree really does seem more and more like it the more I look at it. "Wei Yang, is that you?" Ocean's ancient voice suddenly rang out in her head. Yi Wei Yang sighed. "Tree King, it really is you. If it were someone else, it would have been impossible for them to discover her existence. Only you can enter the valley silently. Why don't you give up on the assassination and sit down and have a chat with him?" The Banyan Tree King said. Li Qingshan was currently leaping down from the main peak. "Just what benefits did Li Qingshan give you to make you act so biased? Not only do you help him maintain the formations, but you even divulged my whereabouts." Yi Weiyang was rather displeased. If the Banyan Tree King had kept so many night roamers from her because he was abiding by his principles, she could understand that, but he had gone too far. He had gone against the basic principles he had always followed. They all raised their heads and looked around. When Ghost Shadow heard the two words Shadow Empress, his face changed drastically. Although he knew it was useless, he still looked around instinctively. The Shadow Empress. She's here. Has she come to take me away? If she learns about my plans, wouldn't that mean— When he thought up to there, he no longer dared to think about it anymore. He dismissed his thoughts in a hurry and stopped letting his thoughts run wild. With that punch alone, you're worthy of the title of King of Savages. Coupled with that strike, it's no wonder you can sweep through the South. Even the King of Southern You has underestimated you. Yi Weiyang's voice rang out slowly, drifting about. Hearing this voice, Ghost Shadow's face became even paler. Li Qingshan frowned slightly. Even with the power of the spirit turtle, he was unable to lock onto her location. This was the power of the greatest assassin of the Mist Province. She really did live up to her reputation. We've never had any grievances or grievances. I even have so many night roamers under my command, so we can be regarded as kindred spirits. Don't tell me you've been instigated by the myriad poison monster to oppose me? Before you say that, why don't you try to survive first, Li Qingshan? Little N ignored it, continuing to swing at the Shadow Queen. It was just the same plain strike, without any sharp light or chilling sword chi. Nice. Li Qingshan praised inside. He never thought that not only would her cultivation progress so quickly in the past few years in the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, but even her swordsmanship had improved so much. She had merged the Buddhist, Dharma, and Zen principles into the path of the sword, breaking away from the sword intent of the three absolutes calligraphy and forming a style of her own. Yi Weiyang brushed past Little and dodged Li Qingshan's attack at the same time, but a bloody mark appeared on her face. Although she had dodged the Buddha-slaying sword, she was still injured by the invisible sword chi, which made her even more furious. However, compared to the damage she had caused, this was basically a negligible sacrifice. She was actually so fearless of her life. A thin, bloody mark appeared on Little N's fair neck, circling around it. The bowstring had already severed it, but she still paid no attention to it. She combined their swords with Li Qingshan and charged towards the Shadow Queen again. Yi Weiyang's body flickered, swimming through the blades. Her heart was filled with disbelief. She's been beheaded, but she's actually treating it like nothing. Is she still human? In this world, unless they were ghosts, the body was extremely important. No matter how high their cultivation was, they could not be damaged so easily. However, Little and even Li Qingshan had both broken this common sense. Speaking from their very nature, they were not human. Little and practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, so her body was just an illusion. When the bowstring swept past, it only separated her neck bones slightly. Li Qingshan went without saying. Only someone who could overwhelm him with absolute strength, like the Dragon King of the Sea, could kill him. The two of them worked together to fend off a powerful enemy. They were extremely well coordinated, sword chi interwove and layered on top of each other. However, Yi Weiyang moved through the streaks of light like a fish in the surging waves. She was completely unscathed. In the end, she leapt up and merged into the night again. For now, it's difficult for her to pose a fatal threat to me and Shaoan, but it's almost impossible to kill her. If she keeps dodging, we won't even be able to harm her. She really is the most difficult person to deal with since coming to the southern border. Li Qingshan furrowed his brows in thought. Compared to the Shadow Queen, the fire-devouring kings instead posed a greater threat to him, as the strength of assassins lay in targeting vital points and defeating those stronger than them despite being weaker. However, if they did not have any vital points, the threat of an assassin would be drastically reduced. Meanwhile, the fire-devouring king's powers of flames could crush them head-on. No matter what their weak points were, they would be burnt to a crisp as long as they were not strong enough. However, in comparison, killing the Shadow Queen was much more difficult than killing the fire-devouring kings. The two of them are at the second heavenly tribulation, but the strength they've demonstrated is already close to third heavenly tribulation cultivators. And I don't know what cultivation method they practice, but their bodies are vastly different from regular people. Piercing their hearts and beheading them is useless. No wonder the myriad poison is so generous. I didn't think the matter would actually be so troublesome. Yi Weiyang was no longer as relaxed as she was in the beginning. She began to think seriously. If I want to kill him, I'll have to take some risks and engage him in close combat. Yi Weiyang's eyes turned cold, and she silently took out a dagger. The dagger was around a foot in length and completely black and transparent, like a half-transparent shadow. Chapter 8:15. The curved moon sank a little further. Their clash had only lasted for a moment, and the danger Li Qingshan had faced was one of the few battles he had faced in his life. He had not used his full strength, and the Shadow Queen had clearly held back too. If they continued fighting, Li Qingshan personally believed he could not do anything to her. Taking a beating passively was not in his character, so all he could do was avoid her for now. However, if he did that, his series of plans in the south would be greatly affected. Now that the Banyan Tree King had stepped forward to mediate, it was for the best. As a result, he arrived before the great banyan tree and maintained his distance from the Shadow Queen. Although she had appeared, she was still blurry, as if she could merge with the darkness at any time. It was even more impossible to see her face clearly. Li Qingshan did not disperse his demonic armor either. He temporarily folded up his phoenix wings, letting them hang on his back like two balls of fire. He could not place all his hopes on others at any time. He had to be prepared for the worst. Please allow me to mediate for the two of you. Although the Banyan Tree King said, please, his tone left no room for negotiation. The cloud-like canopy swayed gently in the night wind, producing a rustling sound. It was a tangible sense of the dignity this demon king of the Mist Province possessed. Please go ahead. Yi Weiyang fiddled around with the shadow dagger in her hand and glanced at Li Qingshan. Weiyang, you said you wanted to test his qualifications, so I let you try. What do you think now? The Banyan Tree King asked. He's qualified. Yi Weiyang could not help but admit this. His strength could be described as exceeding her expectations. Then let's sit down and talk. The Banyan Tree King said. Two aerial roots drooped down, coiling into two seats. A wooden pillar rose up between the seats, holding a simple wooden teapot and a few teacups. There's no need to talk. He's actually using the Shadow Palace to threaten me. He's definitely going to die tonight. Yi Weiyang did not sit down. Although she respected the Banyan Tree King, she still had her pride as the Shadow Queen. Then let's give it a try. Li Qingshan laughed, baring his fangs. He was never a kind person. If the two of you can really fight to the death, how can I be a good person for nothing? If you trust me, then sit down. The Banyan Tree King said. He was not a peacemaker who would stick his nose into everything. His mediation was to protect the interests of both parties. At this point, Yi Weiyang couldn't say anything more. She sat down, and Li Qingshan also sat opposite her. They looked at each other warily. Qingshan, this mediation is related to the success or failure of your matters in the southern border. You can't fight because of personal feelings anymore. I am willing to help you resolve today's crisis. Weiyang, I've known you for a long time and can be considered to have an understanding of your strength. This mediation concerns the future of you and the Shadow Palace, so you can't underestimate me anymore. I'll help you avoid future disasters. The Banyan Tree King's voice was calm and magnanimous. Moreover, it was all for their sake, so they couldn't help but submit. When Yi Weiyang heard the solemn tone of the Banyan Tree King, she couldn't help but re-examine Li Qingshan in front of her. He is only 30-something years old now, but he already has such strength. Furthermore, it seems like he hasn't used his full strength yet. How terrifying! If he is given another 30 years, he might really become a person whose name will shake the world. That girl called Little, and is not below him in terms of talent. The future disasters that the Tree King mentioned are not empty words. If the two of you have no objections, then please show your true face to show your sincerity, the Banyan Tree King said. Li Qingshan extended his hand and picked up the teapot, pouring himself a cup of tea. The vicious armor on his hand turned to dust and dispersed, disintegrating inch by inch. He took a sip of the tea and stared at his face in the clear tea. Demonifying to hide his identity as the North Moon was quite a good idea. Little and accepted the teapot from the side and poured a cup for the Shadow Queen. She made a gesture of please. Her composure gave off an ethereal aura. Li Qingshan needed to take a forceful stance. He could not back down, so she had come to express his sincerity in his place, urging him to mediate this time. Even though they were enemies, Yi Weiyang could not help but sigh in admiration of her bearing. However, she found their relationship even more difficult to understand. Brother and sister? Couple? But they did not seem like it either. She accepted the teacup and nodded at Little, and she held the teacup and sipped it carefully. She was extremely elegant, completely different from her malevolence and viciousness when she was assassinating someone. Compared to human nobles, night roamers could be regarded as even more ancient nobles, one of the 7 divine kingdoms. A pair of large, deep blue eyes emerged from the blurry shadows, as if they had parted the thick mist and revealed themselves. The corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitched. He was rather surprised. The greatest assassin of the Mist Province actually had a harmless, babyish face. Coupled with her petite figure, she seemed like a young girl, which was quite different from what he had imagined her to be. Of course, her actual age was definitely much older than she seemed on the surface. What are you looking at? Yi Weiyang sat with her legs crossed and placed her right arm on the table, propping up her cheek. She picked up a cup of tea with her left hand and drank it all in a single gulp as she said coldly. However, her voice was gone too. Just now, it had become rather sweet and gloomy, and it no longer seemed as dignified as before. Although she had become a cutie in a single second, Li Qingshan did not relax at all. The Shadow Queen was still the Shadow Queen. At the same time, he stared at her closely, which made Yi Weiyang very unhappy. The Banyan Tree King sighed inside. It was said that when people were angry, their intelligence would be no different from that of a child. So he did not do something like pacifying a child. I've already stated the pros and cons clearly, so let's talk about it. If you leave right now, I'll treat it like nothing has happened. Li Qingshan lowered the curtain and said indifferently, for the sake of the Tree King, I can spare your life. I'll be taking all the night roamers here with me. Yi Weiyang placed down the teacup and said firmly, don't even think about it. Li Qingshan's voice was just as indifferent as before, but it was filled with unparalleled determination. Then there's no need to talk about it. They're my clansmen. If you want to return to your race, I will not blame you. Yi Weiyang looked at Li Qingshan in surprise. She did not expect that not only did he not obstruct them, but he also expressed his stance like this. Could it be that there was some conspiracy? Li Qingshan responded with a smile, which made him seem even more magnanimous. Master, I will never leave you. Yi Liubo immediately arrived beside Li Qingshan. Her eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. Yi Weiyang frowned. Sure enough, there was a scheme. She never thought this despicable kid would actually use love to bewitch people. However, a night roamer who could be bewitched by love was not worth her attention. She could tell a long time ago that Yi Liubo's talent was not particularly impressive. She had basically reached her limit by cultivating to this point. It was basically impossible for her to advance any further. What determined the direction of this group of night roamers was still Yi Liusu. Yi Liusu sank into her thoughts. Yi Liuxing gazed at her silently, waiting for her to make a decision. Quite a while later, Yi Liusu said, "Ma, am Shadow Queen. I am willing to join the Shadow Palace and accept your command." "All right." Yi Weiyang was overjoyed. She looked at Li Qingshan and asked, "What else do you have to say?" Li Qingshan understood that Yi Liusu prioritized the race over everything, so it was not strange at all for her to make a decision like that. However, he still felt slightly disappointed. "If that's the case," she pointed at her and said, "You sure are cunning. You won't listen to me, yet you want to take me as your master." Yi Liusu said, "I believe you feel the same way as me." "What do I feel?" "I hope the night roamers can develop and strengthen. I hope I can gaze up at the stars and moon freely and never be oppressed by anyone again." Yi Liusu raised her head and stared straight into Yi Weiyang's eyes. Because it came from the bottom of her heart, she seemed extremely sincere. This was an unyielding ideal that she had experienced countless hardships. Compared to her personal gains and losses, she valued the entire clan more. Even if many clansmen wanted to kill her, she would not change her mind. Yi Weiyang was moved by this too. Some things could not be faked, much less fooling her eyes. Li Qingshan said, "Fellow Shadow Queen, there's still night roamers at the end of the day. Don't you dare, but when we night roamers are talking." Yi Weiyang barked. Unknowingly, her attitude towards Li Qingshan had become much friendlier. Just now, she was filled with killing intent towards Li Qingshan. She even refused to accept the Banyan Tree King's mediation. The most important reason for this was because he had enslaved her clansmen. Now that the misunderstanding had been resolved, she understood that the situation was completely different from what she had imagined it to be. Not only was he not an oppressor, but he was even a liberator and protector from a certain perspective. "I'm an outsider, so it's best if I leave first. Liusu, why don't you have a good chat with this senior of yours?" Li Qingshan shrugged with a smile and stood up, pulling Yi Liusu to his seat. It was all thanks to her clever speech that this mediation had succeeded. With how much the Shadow Queen valued her clansmen, she would never give up until she achieved her objective. However, if they submitted to the Shadow Palace so easily, not only would it humiliate him, but it would also touch on many of his secrets. This could be regarded as the best outcome. "All right, Qingshan," said Yi Liusu. Li Qingshan was taken aback. He touched her cheek and smiled. "Sure enough, you're emboldened by someone's support. I just wanted to ease your mind earlier. Actually, I'm reluctant to let you leave either." He had never cared too much about titles. From a certain perspective, he was actually a person who pursued equality very much. Back in the Clear River Prefecture, even when his cultivation completely surpassed Hua Sengzan and the others, he did not think of himself as superior. He still behaved normally. However, not everyone in this world could get along with each other like that. There would always be bitches who felt they should be superior to you, and there would always be enemies who needed to speak with their fists. If you did not stomp on their heads, they would not know what you were. Iliosu's face reddened slightly.